What's going on, everyone? It's Bender here. We've got something amazing for you today. What if Harry was adopted by the Flamels at age 6 and mastered alchemy before attending Beauxbatons? Real quick, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join thousands of story lovers and hit that subscribe button. Alright, story time. Chapter 1, The Alchemist's apprentice rain lashed against the windows of number 4, Privet Drive as 6-year-old Harry Potter huddled beneath the threadbare blanket in his cupboard. Outside, thunder rumbled across Little Whinging like a giant's footsteps. Harry pressed his palms against his ears, counting seconds between lightning flashes and thunderclaps to distract himself from his growling stomach. Uncle Vernon had sent him to bed without dinner again. This time for a broken glass that Dudley had knocked over but blamed on Harry. It wasn't fair, but nothing ever was at the Dursleys. A particularly loud crash made the house shudder. Harry squeezed his eyes shut, wishing himself somewhere else, anywhere else. He imagined a place where people actually wanted him, where no one shouted or locked him away, where magic was real. Magic. The forbidden word. Uncle Vernon's face always turned purple whenever Harry accidentally mentioned anything that sounded even remotely magical. There is no such thing as magic, he would bellow, spittle flying from his mustache. Another lightning bolt split the sky, illuminating the cupboard through cracks in the door. For just an instant, Harry thought he saw his few possessions, a broken toy soldier, a chipped cup, and a small pile of clothes, floating several inches above the floor. He blinked, and everything clattered back down. "Stop it," he whispered to himself. "Stop doing weird things." But deep inside, a warm, tingling sensation spread through his chest. It felt like something alive, something that belonged to him alone, something the Dursleys couldn't take away no matter how hard they tried. 3,000 miles away, in a centuries-old château nestled among the lavender fields of Provence, Nicholas Flamel looked up from his ancient text. The alchemist's silver eyebrows furrowed as he felt a distinct ripple in the ethereal currents he had spent over 6 centuries learning to sense. "Perenelle," he called, his voice still strong despite his great age. "Did you feel that?" His wife of more than 600 years glanced up from her workbench where a complex arrangement of crystal vials connected by silver tubes bubbled with iridescent liquids. Her dark eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, narrowed thoughtfully. "Indeed," she said, carefully adjusting a flame beneath one of her potions. "Such raw potential, and from Britain, if I'm not mistaken." Nicholas stroked his neatly trimmed beard. "The last time we felt something similar was, Godric Gryffindor, yes." Perenelle smiled at the memory. "Just before we helped the founders establish Hogwarts. This signature feels familiar somehow." Nicholas crossed the laboratory, his midnight blue robes sweeping across the polished stone floor. He waved his hand and a large crystal sphere rose from its pedestal, glowing with swirling silver mist. "Show me," he commanded. The mist parted to reveal the image of a small boy with unruly black hair and startlingly green eyes, huddled in what appeared to be a cupboard beneath a staircase. "Merlin's beard," Nicholas whispered. "It's Lily and James's boy." Perenelle abandoned her potions and hurried to her husband's side, her ageless face betraying rare surprise. "Harry Potter. The child who survived the killing curse." "The very same." Nicholas's expression darkened. "What in the name of the great work is he doing living in a cupboard?" Albus assured the magical community he was being well cared for by his mother's relatives, Perenelle said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This is not what I would call well cared for, Nicholas." The ancient alchemist waved his hand again, and the image expanded to show more of Harry's surroundings. They watched as the boy reached for a broken toy soldier, his small fingers trembling. Suddenly, the toy began to glow with soft golden light, repairing itself before their eyes. "Spontaneous transmutation," Nicholas breathed. "At his age, without training or a wand." Perenelle's eyes gleamed. "We've waited a long time for an apprentice worthy of our knowledge, my love." Nicholas nodded, his decision already made. I'll contact Dumbledore immediately. It's time the boy who lived was given a chance to truly live, and learn. Albus Dumbledore was having a rather frustrating evening at Hogwarts. The latest batch of fizzing whiz-bees he'd ordered from Honeydukes had an unfortunate side effect of turning his beard blue for several hours, and the Board of Governors was once again questioning his decision to keep Sybil Trelawney on staff. He was just considering whether a midnight snack of hot chocolate might improve matters when his fireplace erupted in emerald flames. "Albus," came a voice he hadn't heard in nearly a decade. "We need to talk." Dumbledore looked up to see the stern face of Nicholas Flamel in his fireplace, and he immediately knew this wasn't a social call. "Nicholas, old friend. What an unexpected pleasure." Dumbledore adjusted his half-moon spectacles. "To what do I owe this surprise?" "Harry Potter." Dumbledore's smile faded slightly. "What about him?" "He's being mistreated, Albus. Living in a cupboard, underfed, unloved." Nicholas's ancient eyes bore into Dumbledore's. "And he's displaying remarkable magical abilities. Alchemical abilities, specifically." "That's not possible," Dumbledore said carefully. "He's only 6 years old." "I know what I sensed." Nicholas's tone left no room for argument. "Perenelle and I both felt it. The boy has an extraordinary gift for elemental transmutation." Dumbledore sighed, suddenly looking every one of his many years. "The Blood Wards, Nicholas. They're the only thing keeping him safe from Voldemort's remaining followers." "And who's keeping him safe from those muggles?" Nicholas countered. "Besides, you know as well as I do that there are other protections equally powerful." "What are you suggesting?" "That you allow us to adopt him," Nicholas said. "Perenelle and I can offer him not only protection but education suited to his unique gifts. Our home is unplottable, protected by enchantments we've perfected over 6 centuries. He would be safe with us, and happy." "And what of his Hogwarts attendance when the time comes?" Dumbledore asked. Nicholas smiled thinly. "Perhaps Beauxbatons would better suit a young alchemist. Madame Maxime already accepts our counsel on such matters." Dumbledore steepled his fingers, his brilliant mind calculating possibilities, risks, and potential outcomes. "You realize what you're asking? The wizarding world expects Harry Potter to attend Hogwarts." "The wizarding world expected Harry Potter to die on October 31st, 1981, Nicholas replied sharply. "Their expectations were wrong then, and they may be wrong now." After a long silence, Dumbledore nodded. "I will come to your château tomorrow. We'll visit Privet Drive together and assess the situation." "Tonight, Albus," Nicholas insisted. "We go tonight." Harry woke to the sound of hushed voices in the Dursleys' living room. It was still dark outside, but the storm had passed. He pressed his ear against the cupboard door, straining to hear. Absolutely not. That was Uncle Vernon, sounding more furious than Harry had ever heard him. "We took the boy in out of the goodness of our hearts, and we won't have him whisked away by your kind. Mr. Dursley." This voice was unfamiliar, elderly but powerful. "I assure you, we have only Harry's best interests at heart." "His best interests?" Aunt Petunia's shrill voice joined in. "You people dropped him on our doorstep without so much as a by your leave. And now you waltz in here in the middle of the night claiming to be concerned. Perhaps if you had treated him as your own son instead of a burden, we would not be having this conversation." This was a woman's voice, accented and cold with barely controlled anger. Harry's heart pounded. Were these people here for him? Who were they? "How dare you?" Uncle Vernon bellowed. "We've clothed him, fed him, he sleeps in a cupboard, Mr. Dursley." Another man's voice, calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "He wears clothes 4 sizes too large. And according to our scans, he's significantly undernourished." Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Harry pushed gently against his cupboard door. To his surprise, the lock clicked open without him touching it. He crept out, staying close to the wall as he peered around the corner into the living room. Uncle Vernon stood red-faced in his dressing gown, fists clenched at his sides. Aunt Petunia hovered near the fireplace, her bony arms crossed. Facing them were three of the strangest people Harry had ever seen. One was an incredibly old man with a long white beard and half-moon spectacles, wearing what looked like purple pajamas. Next to him stood an equally ancient-looking man with silver hair and beard, dressed in dark blue robes embroidered with silver stars. Completing the trio was a beautiful woman with ageless features and piercing dark eyes, wearing elegant deep green robes. It was the silver-haired man who noticed Harry first. "Ah," he said softly, his eyes twinkling. "Hello, young Harry." Everyone turned to look at him. Harry shrank back against the wall, suddenly afraid he'd be punished for leaving his cupboard. The woman in green approached him, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Don't be frightened, child," she said, her accent melodic and soothing. "We're here to help you." "Who are you?" Harry whispered. She smiled. "My name is Perenelle Flamel. This is my husband Nicholas, and our colleague Albus Dumbledore. We're friends of your parents." "My parents?" Harry's eyes widened. The Dursleys never spoke of his parents except to say they'd died in a car crash. "You knew them?" "Indeed we did," Nicholas said, stepping forward. "Lily and James were exceptional people. And you, Harry Potter, are an exceptional boy." "Boy!" Uncle Vernon roared. "Get back in your cupboard this instant." Harry flinched, but before he could move, the one called Dumbledore raised a thin wooden stick, and suddenly Uncle Vernon couldn't speak. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "That will be quite enough, Mr. Dursley," Dumbledore said calmly. "Harry deserves to hear the truth, at least in part." "The truth?" Harry asked. "About what?" Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged glances. "About who you are, Harry," Nicholas said gently. "About the gift you possess, a gift your aunt and uncle have tried to suppress." "I don't have any gifts," Harry said quickly, shooting a nervous glance at his aunt and uncle. Perenelle smiled kindly. "What happened to your toy soldier during the storm, Harry?" Harry froze. How could they possibly know about that? "It's all right," she continued. "What you did was natural. It was magic, Harry. You're a wizard, just as your parents were a witch and wizard before you." "There's no such thing as," Harry began automatically, parroting his uncle's frequent declaration. "No such thing as magic," Nicholas finished, his eyes twinkling. He withdrew a wooden stick similar to Dumbledore's from his robes and waved it. The ugly vase Aunt Petunia had received from Uncle Vernon's sister transformed into a beautiful crystal flower that bloomed and changed colors before their eyes. Harry gasped, a strange feeling of recognition and longing swelling in his chest. This was it, the thing he'd always felt inside him, the thing that made strange events happen around him. Magic. "We would like to offer you a home, Harry," Perenelle said softly. "A place where you can learn to use your gifts, where you'll be cared for and valued." "You want me?" Harry could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Very much so," Nicholas nodded. "We have no children of our own, and we've been looking for a special young person to teach our particular branch of magic." "Nicholas," Dumbledore warned quietly. "He deserves to know, Albus," Nicholas replied. "Harry, you've shown signs of a rare talent called alchemy, the magical science of transformation. My wife and I have studied it for a very long time." Harry looked back and forth between these strange people and the Dursleys. Aunt Petunia was pale as a ghost, and Uncle Vernon still couldn't speak, though he was making strangled noises. It seemed too good to be true that these people would just appear and take him away. Would I ever have to come back here?" he asked in a small voice. "Never," Perenelle assured him firmly. "Our home would be your home, permanently." "What about Dudley?" Harry asked, glancing toward the stairs where his cousin might be sleeping. Nicholas's eyebrows rose. Your cousin. Do you wish him to visit you? Harry shook his head quickly. No. I just wondered if he had magic too. Perenelle laughed softly. No, child. Your cousin is what we call a muggle, a non-magical person, like your aunt and uncle. Then why was I sent to live here? Harry couldn't help asking. If I'm magical and they're not? The three visitors exchanged complicated glances. That, Dumbledore said gently, is a conversation for when you're a bit older, Harry. The important thing now, Nicholas added, is deciding what you want. Would you like to come live with us, Harry? To learn magic and alchemy? Harry didn't even need to think about it. Yes, he said firmly. Yes, please. Now see here. Uncle Vernon had apparently regained his voice. We never agreed to, Mr. Dursley, Dumbledore interrupted, his voice suddenly cold. You have failed in the task entrusted to you. Be grateful we are not pursuing further consequences. Something in Dumbledore's tone made even Uncle Vernon fall silent. Harry, Nicholas said kindly, why don't you go gather your belongings? We'll be leaving shortly. It took Harry less than 5 minutes to collect everything he owned, his few clothes, the newly repaired toy soldier, and a small blanket he'd had for as long as he could remember. When he returned to the living room, the adults were engaged in tense conversation that immediately stopped when he appeared. Is that everything, Harry? Perenelle asked, looking at his meager possessions with an expression that made Harry feel both sad and hopeful. He nodded. I don't have much. Well, she smiled, taking his small hand in hers, we'll soon remedy that. Nicholas turned to the Dursleys. You'll need to sign these papers, he said, producing a sheaf of official-looking documents. They transfer guardianship of Harry to us. Good riddance, Uncle Vernon muttered, snatching the papers and signing without even reading them. Aunt Petunia hesitated, something unreadable flickering across her pinched face before she too signed. Harry, Dumbledore said, kneeling down to look the boy in the eyes. I want you to know that your parents would be very proud of you. The Flamels are excellent people who will take good care of you. I'll be checking in from time to see how you're getting along. Harry nodded, not entirely sure what to say. Everything was happening so fast. Are you ready, child? Nicholas asked, extending his hand. Harry took one last look around the house that had never been a home to him. Ready, he said firmly, placing his small hand in Nicholas's larger one. The last thing he saw before the strange pulling sensation whisked him away was Aunt Petunia's face, wearing an expression he'd never seen before, something almost like regret. Harry's first impression of Château Flamel was that it couldn't possibly be real. They had arrived via something Nicholas called portkey, which made Harry's stomach feel like it had been turned inside out, on a hillside overlooking a breathtaking landscape of purple lavender fields stretching to distant mountains. Before them stood a magnificent structure that seemed part medieval castle, part elegant mansion. Turrets and towers rose alongside graceful balconies and terraces. The stone walls gleamed golden in the early morning sunlight, for somehow, despite it being the middle of the night in England, dawn was breaking here. Welcome to your new home, Harry, Nicholas said, watching the boy's awestruck expression with amusement. Where are we? Harry asked, turning in a slow circle to take in the spectacular view. Southern France, Perenelle answered. In Provence. This has been our home for the past 4 centuries. Harry blinked. 4 centuries. The Flamels exchanged another of their meaningful glances. Come inside, Nicholas said, placing a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder. I think it's time for some explanations, and perhaps some breakfast. You must be hungry. The interior of the château was even more astonishing than the outside. Moving portraits lined the walls, their occupants waving or bowing to the Flamels as they passed. Staircases shifted their configurations, doorways appeared and disappeared, and throughout the castle, strange devices whirred and puffed, many emitting colorful smoke or soft musical tones. Harry was led to a beautiful dining room with a ceiling enchanted to show the sky above, much like the one at Hogwarts that Dumbledore would later tell him about. A table laden with more food than Harry had ever seen at once appeared as they entered. "Please, eat," Perenelle encouraged, guiding him to a chair. "We have much to discuss, but it will be better on a full stomach." Harry didn't need to be told twice. He filled his plate with croissants, fruit, eggs, and sausages, trying to remember his manners despite his hunger. "Now then," Nicholas said once Harry had eaten his fill. "I'm sure you have many questions." Harry nodded, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Are you really hundreds of years old?" Nicholas chuckled. "Direct and to the point, I appreciate that." "Yes, Harry, we are. My wife and I are alchemists." "Do you know what that means?" Harry shook his head. "Alchemy is a magical discipline that studies transformation," Perenelle explained. "The transmutation of one substance into another, the enhancement of properties, the distillation of essences. Our greatest achievement," Nicholas continued, "was the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, an object that can transform base metals into gold and produce the elixir of life, which grants extended longevity to those who drink it." "So that's how you've lived so long?" Harry asked, fascinated. "With this elixir?" "Precisely," Nicholas nodded. "We've lived for over 6 centuries, watching the world change around us while continuing our studies." Harry frowned, trying to process this information. "But why do you want me?" "I don't know anything about alchemy." "Ah, but you do," Perenelle said with a mysterious smile. "That night during the storm, when you repaired your toy soldier. That was a form of transmutation, alchemical magic. Most wizards and witches need wands and specific spells to accomplish such feats, but you did it instinctively. We've been searching for an apprentice with natural alchemical talent for a very long time," Nicholas added. "Someone to share our knowledge with, to continue our work when we, eventually decide to move on." "I still don't understand," Harry said slowly. "What happened to my parents?" "The Dursleys said they died in a car crash, but—" The Flamels' expressions turned grave. "That was a lie," Nicholas said gently. "Your parents, Lily and James Potter, were murdered by a dark wizard who called himself Lord Voldemort." "Murdered?" Harry whispered, feeling as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. "Why?" "It's a long and complicated story," Perenelle said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But the short version is that Voldemort was terrorizing magical Britain. Your parents fought against him, and he targeted them. He came to your home on Halloween night when you were just 15 months old. He killed your parents," Nicholas continued solemnly, "and then turned his wand on you." "On me?" Harry's hand instinctively moved to the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. "Is that how I got this?" "Yes," Nicholas confirmed. "But something extraordinary happened. When Voldemort cast the killing curse at you, a spell that no one had ever survived, it rebounded upon him instead. Voldemort was destroyed, and you became known throughout the wizarding world as the boy who lived." Harry sat in stunned silence. The story seemed impossible, and yet, it felt true, more true than anything the Dursleys had ever told him. "I'm famous?" he finally asked. "In Britain, extremely so," Perenelle said. "Which is one reason we thought you might be happier here in France, away from all that attention. Here, you can simply be Harry, our apprentice and ward, not a celebrity." "And my parents?" Harry struggled to find the words. "What were they like?" "Your father James was brilliant, particularly at transfiguration, a magical discipline related to alchemy," Nicholas said with a fond smile. "He was brave, loyal to his friends, and quite the prankster." "And your mother Lily was simply extraordinary," Perenelle added warmly. "Clever and kind, with a gift for potions and charm work. She had a way of seeing magical connections that others missed." "We knew them professionally rather than personally," Nicholas admitted. "But we corresponded regularly. Your mother, in particular, showed interest in our alchemical work. We believe you may have inherited your alchemical aptitude from her. Harry tried to absorb all this information, emotions swirling through him, grief for the parents he couldn't remember, anger at the Dursleys for lying, excitement about magic, and overwhelming gratitude toward the Flamels for rescuing him. What happens now? He asked finally. Now, Nicholas said, his eyes twinkling, we begin your education. Not just in alchemy, but in all aspects of magic. You'll need a broad foundation before specializing. When can I start? Harry asked eagerly. The Flamels laughed, clearly delighted by his enthusiasm. How about after you've had a proper night's sleep? Perenelle suggested. Your body is still on British time, and you've had quite an eventful night. Harry suddenly realized how exhausted he was. He tried and failed to stifle a yawn. Come, Perenelle said, rising from her chair. Let me show you to your room. Harry's bedroom in Château Flamel was larger than the Dursleys' entire ground floor. A four-poster bed with deep blue hangings stood near floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the lavender fields. Bookshelves filled with colorful volumes lined one wall, while another featured magical paintings of fantastic creatures that moved and occasionally made soft noises. This is all for me? Harry asked in disbelief. Of course, Perenelle smiled. Though we may need to redecorate to suit your tastes. This room was last used by a visiting scholar about 50 years ago. She showed him the adjoining bathroom with its enormous clawfoot tub, the walk-in closet currently empty but soon to be filled, and the small balcony where, she promised, he could watch the stars on clear nights. We'll go shopping for clothes and other necessities tomorrow, she said. For now, there should be pajamas in the dresser that I've charmed to fit you. Sure enough, Harry found soft blue pajamas that adjusted to his size as soon as he touched them. Sleep well, Harry, Perenelle said, pausing at the door. If you need anything during the night, just speak aloud. The château will hear you and alert us. The château can hear me? Harry asked, eyes wide. Perenelle smiled mysteriously. After 600 years of alchemical experiments, our home has absorbed quite a bit of magic. You'll discover its secrets gradually. After she left, Harry changed into the pajamas and climbed into bed, sinking into the softest mattress he'd ever experienced. He stared up at the ceiling, where stars had begun to appear, twinkling just like real ones. I'm a wizard, he whispered to himself. I'm going to learn alchemy. As sleep began to claim him, Harry felt a peace he'd never known before. For the first time in his memory, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The next 5 years passed in a whirlwind of learning and discovery. True to their word, the Flamels provided Harry with a comprehensive magical education, starting with the basics that any young witch or wizard would learn but quickly advancing to more specialized knowledge. Nicholas taught him wand work, magical theory, and of course, alchemy. Perenelle instructed him in potions, herbology, and the subtle magical arts of divination and enchantment. They brought in tutors for subjects outside their expertise, a stern witch named Madame Lefebvre for French language and magical history, and a jovial wizard called Monsieur Barbier for music and magical creatures. Harry proved to be an exceptional student, particularly in alchemy. By age 8, he could perform basic transmutations with minimal instruction. By 9, he was creating his own variations on classical alchemical processes. And by 10, he had begun to grasp some of the theoretical foundations of the Flamels' greatest work. Your progress is remarkable, Nicholas told him one afternoon as they worked in the main laboratory. It took me decades to achieve what you've mastered in years. Harry, now a tall, lean boy with his perpetually messy black hair tied back to keep it out of his potions, smiled at the praise. I have excellent teachers. More than that, Perenelle said, looking up from her workbench, you have an instinctive understanding of the fundamental principles. You don't just memorize processes, you feel them. It was true. When Harry performed transmutations, he could sense the flow of elements, the subtle exchanges of properties, the balance of energies. It wasn't just academic knowledge but a deep, intuitive connection to the magic itself. Speaking of teaching, Nicholas said, exchanging a glance with his wife, "Your 11th birthday approaches, Harry. It's time we discussed your formal magical education." Harry looked up from the silver disc he was attempting to transform into a mirror. "You mean school? Like Hogwarts?" The Flamels had told him about the various magical schools around the world, including Hogwarts where his parents had studied. Harry had always assumed he would attend there when the time came. "We believe Beauxbatons Academy might be a better fit for you," Perenelle said carefully. "Their curriculum places greater emphasis on the transformative arts, including alchemy. Madame Maxime, the headmistress, is an old friend who understands your unique situation." "But my parents went to Hogwarts," Harry said, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "And Professor Dumbledore is there. Albus visits us regularly, as you know," Nicholas reminded him. "And he agrees that Beauxbatons would offer advantages for your particular talents." Harry considered this. He'd grown to love France and had become fluent in French thanks to Madame Lefebvre's rigorous lessons. The thought of returning to Britain, where he was apparently famous for something he couldn't even remember, was somewhat unsettling. "Would I still be able to continue my alchemical studies?" he asked. "Absolutely," Nicholas assured him. "We've arranged for you to return home on weekends for advanced tutorials. And during the week, you'll have access to Beauxbatons' substantial alchemical collection, including several rare texts they acquired from my colleagues centuries ago." Harry nodded slowly. "All right. Beauxbatons it is." "Excellent," Perenelle beamed. "Now, let's see how that mirror is coming along." 1 week before Harry's 11th birthday, the Flamels hosted a small dinner party. The guests included Albus Dumbledore, Aunt Maxime, the imposing headmistress of Beauxbatons, and, to Harry's surprise, a girl about his age named Elise Dubois. "Elise will be starting at Beauxbatons with you," Perenelle explained as they prepared for the evening. "Her parents are prominent potion masters who supply some of our more exotic ingredients. We thought you might like to meet a future classmate." Harry nodded, suddenly nervous. Despite his extensive magical education, his interaction with other children had been minimal. The Flamels had kept him somewhat isolated, partly to protect him from unwanted attention and partly because their remote château wasn't exactly surrounded by magical families with children. When Elise arrived with her parents, Harry's nervousness increased. She was a pretty girl with curly brown hair and intelligent hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She greeted the Flamels with perfect poise, then turned to Harry with an appraising look. "So you're Harry Potter," she said in French. "Papa says you're an alchemical prodigy." Harry felt his cheeks warm. "I just have good teachers," he replied in the same language. Elise smiled, revealing dimples. "Show me something." Before Harry could respond, Nicholas chuckled behind them. "Perhaps demonstrations can wait until after dinner, young lady. Madame Maxime has just arrived." Aunt Maxime made quite an entrance, as was inevitable for a half-giantess standing nearly 12 feet tall. She had to duck significantly to enter the Flamels' dining room, despite its vaulted ceiling. "Harry Potter," she said, extending a massive hand. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you. Nicholas and Perenelle Ave told me much about your talents." Harry shook her hand, feeling rather dwarfed. "Thank you for accepting me into Beauxbatons, Madame Maxime. It is not often we accept British students," she said with a smile, "but for Z Ward of the Flamels, and one with such gifts, exceptions can be made." Dinner was a lively affair. The adults discussed recent developments in magical research and politics while Harry and Elise cautiously got to know each other. "Have you always known you were magical?" Harry asked her. Elise nodded. "My family has been magical for generations. My great-grandmother was one of the first female professors at Beauxbatons." "What about you? Nicholas and Perenelle found you living with muggles, right?" Harry hesitated, then gave her a simplified version of his story. Elise listened with wide eyes. "So you're famous in Britain? For surviving a curse no one has ever survived before." "Apparently," Harry said uncomfortably. I don't remember any of it. That's why you're going to Beauxbatons instead of Hogwarts. To avoid the attention. Partly, Harry admitted. Also because Beauxbatons has a stronger focus on alchemy. You'll like it there, Elise assured him. The palace is beautiful, almost as beautiful as this château. And the food is excellent. After dinner, at Elise's insistence, Harry demonstrated a few simple alchemical transmutations. He transformed a silver spoon into a delicate rose, then back into a spoon with enhanced properties that caused it to play a soft melody when tapped against a glass. Impressive, Dumbledore remarked, his blue eyes twinkling. Your parents would be proud, Harry. Later, when the guests had departed, Elise promising to save Harry a seat on the carriage to Beauxbatons, Dumbledore remained behind for a private word with Harry. You've flourished here, he said, regarding Harry over his half-moon spectacles. Nicholas and Perenelle have done a remarkable job. They're wonderful, Harry agreed sincerely. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I'd stayed with the Dursleys. Indeed, Dumbledore's expression turned serious. There is something you should know before you begin your formal education, Harry. The wizard who gave you that scar, Lord Voldemort, while greatly diminished, may not be entirely gone. Harry felt a chill despite the warm summer evening. What do you mean? There are signs, Dumbledore said carefully, that suggest he might one day attempt to return. If that happens, you may find yourself in danger once again. Because I'm the boy who lived, Harry said, the title feeling strange on his tongue. Yes. Which is why I am grateful you've had these years of preparation with the Flamels. Your alchemical training, while pursued for its own merits, may one day prove to be a powerful protection. Harry considered this. The Flamels had told him about Voldemort, of course, but they had always emphasized that Harry should focus on his education rather than worrying about threats that might never materialize. Is that why you agreed to let the Flamels adopt me? Harry asked. So I could learn alchemy as a protection? Dumbledore smiled gently. No, Harry. I agreed because they could offer you something you desperately needed, a loving home where your gifts would be nurtured rather than suppressed. The alchemical training is a fortunate bonus. He placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. You are not defined by your past or by the expectations others might place upon you. Remember that at Beauxbatons. You are Harry Potter, not merely the boy who lived. 2 days before Harry was to depart for Beauxbatons, he was working in his private laboratory, a smaller version of the Flamels' main laboratory that they had set up for his 11th birthday. He was attempting a particularly challenging transmutation involving the purification and enhancement of inherent properties in crystals. Deep in concentration, he barely registered the soft knock at his door. Harry. It was Nicholas. May I interrupt? Harry looked up, blinking as his focus shifted. Of course. I was just working on the crystal enhancement you showed me last week. Nicholas entered, his expression troubled. There's been an incident you should know about. Someone attempted to breach the château's defenses last night. Harry's eyes widened. What? Who? We don't know, Nicholas said gravely. The wards repelled them, but they left this behind. He held out a small object that appeared to be a coin, but unlike any Harry had seen before. It was black as midnight with strange red symbols etched into its surface. What is it? Harry asked, instinctively not reaching to touch it. A very dark alchemical artifact, Nicholas replied. One designed to locate and drain sources of alchemical power. He paused significantly. Like you, Harry. Me? Why would someone target me specifically? Nicholas sighed heavily. Albus warned us this might happen. Your unique combination of talents, natural alchemical ability plus whatever protection allowed you to survive the killing curse, makes you valuable to those who practice the darker aspects of our art. Harry frowned. The Philosopher's Stone, is that safe? It is, Nicholas assured him. Perenelle and I have taken precautions. But I'm concerned about your safety at Beauxbatons. We've strengthened the protective enchantments we've placed on you, but you must promise to be vigilant. I will, Harry promised solemnly. Should I tell Elise to watch out for anything strange? Ms. Du Bois seems like a trustworthy friend, Nicholas smiled slightly. Yes, it would be wise to have an ally who knows to be alert. But be discreet, we don't want to cause unnecessary panic. Nicholas moved to leave, then paused. Harry, there's something else you should know. The symbols on this coin, they're associated with a group called the Opus Tenibri. The dark work, Harry translated automatically, his years of Latin study with Madame Lefebvre paying off. Yes. They're a secretive organization of dark alchemists who believe that immortality can be achieved not through the Philosopher's Stone, but through the sacrifice of magically powerful individuals. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. And they think I would be a good sacrifice? They may believe that your unique survival of the killing curse makes you an ideal catalyst for their work, Nicholas said grimly. Perenelle and I will continue investigating. In the meantime, focus on your studies at Beauxbatons, but remember what I've taught you about defensive alchemy. After Nicholas left, Harry sat staring at his half-completed crystal transmutation. He'd spent 5 years in the peaceful security of Château Flamel, almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought him there. Now, it seemed, the outside world, with all its dangers, was reaching for him once again. With renewed determination, he returned to his work. If dark alchemists were hunting him, he would make sure he was prepared to face them. The morning of Harry's departure for Beauxbatons dawned clear and bright. His trunks were packed with everything he would need: robes of fine blue silk, the Beauxbatons uniform, books, potion ingredients, his personal alchemical equipment, and various protective amulets Perenelle had insisted he take. Remember, Nicholas said as they prepared to depart, your weekend visits home are not just for continued alchemical training. If anything unusual occurs at school, anything at all, tell us immediately. I will, Harry promised. And I'll practice the protective transmutations every night before bed, just as you taught me. Perenelle pulled him into a tight embrace. We are so proud of you, Harry. These 5 years have been a joy. Harry hugged her back, surprised to find himself blinking away tears. Despite his excitement about attending Beauxbatons, leaving the château, leaving Nicholas and Perenelle, was harder than he'd expected. I'll be back every weekend, he reminded her. And holidays, Nicholas added with a smile. Now, let's not keep Madame Maxime waiting. They traveled by Portkey to a secluded clearing near a magnificent palace that seemed to be made entirely of white marble. Huge, powder-blue carriages drawn by enormous winged horses were lined up in the grounds, waiting to transport students to the school. Elise spotted them immediately and waved enthusiastically. Harry! Over here! Harry turned to his adoptive parents for one final goodbye. You'll do wonderfully, Nicholas assured him. Just remember, constant vigilance, Harry finished with a smile. It was a phrase Dumbledore's friend Alastor Moody had impressed upon him during a visit the previous year. With a final hug for both Flamels, Harry joined Elise by one of the carriages. Ready for this? She asked, eyes bright with excitement. Harry looked back at Nicholas and Perenelle, then at the magnificent palace that would be his school for the next 7 years. He touched the amulet hidden beneath his robes, felt the reassuring weight of his wand in its holster, and nodded. Ready. Beauxbatons' Academy of Magic was every bit as spectacular as Elise had described. The palace gleamed in the sunlight, its architecture a harmonious blend of Renaissance elegance and magical whimsy. Fountains depicting magical creatures sprayed jets of water that changed color and formed shapes in the air. The grounds were immaculately landscaped, with gardens of rare magical plants arranged in intricate patterns that, Harry realized, formed massive alchemical symbols when viewed from above. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. The entrance hall featured a ceiling that displayed not just the sky above, but the cosmic movements of planets and stars. Statues of famous witches and wizards lined the grand staircase, occasionally offering advice or commentary to passing students. First years, this way please, called a tall wizard in powder blue robes. "Welcome to Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. I am Professor Laurent, Deputy Headmaster. Please follow me for the welcome ceremony." The new students were led to a circular chamber with walls of pure crystal that refracted light in dazzling patterns. At the center stood Madame Maxime, even more imposing in her formal robes of midnight blue. "Welcome to Beauxbatons," she announced in French, her voice echoing magnificently. "For the next 7 years, you will learn not just spells and potions, but how to embody the grace, sophistication, and excellence that Beauxbatons has represented for 7 centuries. She proceeded to explain the school's traditions, expectations, and house system. Unlike Hogwarts with its 4 houses, Beauxbatons had 3, papillonless, symbolized by butterfly wings, emphasizing grace and artistic expression, ombrelon, symbolized by a crescent moon, focusing on scholarly achievement and intellectual depth, and belfoule, symbolized by leaves, valuing harmony with nature and community. "Now," Madame Maxime continued, "each of you will be sorted into your house by the miroir de l'âme, the mirror of the soul." A tall, ornate mirror was unveiled, its frame inscribed with ancient runes. One by one, students approached it. As each student stood before the mirror, the glass would ripple and display a symbol, butterfly wings, crescent moon, or leaves, indicating their house. When Harry's turn came, he felt a flutter of nervousness. He approached the mirror, conscious of the whispers that followed him. Despite the Flamels' efforts to keep his adoption private, word had spread that Harry Potter, the famous boy who lived, was attending Beauxbatons instead of Hogwarts. As he stood before the miroir de l'âme, Harry saw not just his reflection but something deeper, as though the mirror was peering into his very essence. The surface rippled, but instead of displaying one of the 3 house symbols, it briefly showed a different image entirely, a phoenix rising from flames. The image lasted only a moment before being replaced by the crescent moon of ombrelon. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Madame Maxime's eyebrows rose, but she merely announced, "Ombrelon," and gestured for Harry to join the other students sorted into that house. Elise, sorted into papillonless, shot him a questioning look, but there was no time to talk as the ceremony continued. After the sorting, the students were led to their respective dormitories. The ombrelon quarters were located in one of the palace's towers, offering spectacular views of the surrounding mountains. The common room was elegant and sophisticated, with walls lined with bookshelves, comfortable study areas, and enchanted windows that could display different landscapes based on students' preferences. "Potter," a voice called as Harry was exploring the common room. "So the rumors are true." Harry turned to see a tall boy with aristocratic features and sleek blonde hair. His expression was more curious than hostile. "You are Harry Potter, yes?" The British boy raised by the Flamels. "That's right," Harry replied cautiously. "And you are?" "Philippe Delacour," the boy said with a slight bow. "My father is on the International Confederation of Wizards with Nicholas Flamel. He speaks highly of your adoptive father's wisdom, though not always his political positions." Harry wasn't sure how to respond to that. The Flamels had mentioned that they sometimes clashed with more traditional magical families on certain issues, but they'd never gone into detail. "It's interesting that you're an ombrelon," Philippe continued. "We rarely get foreign students in our house. Most go to papillonless with their artistic temperaments." He said this with a slight curl of his lip. "The mirror decides based on one's inner nature, doesn't it?" Harry said. "I suppose my years studying alchemy made ombrelon a good fit." Philippe's eyes sharpened with interest. "Alchemy? Real alchemy, not just basic potions and transmutation theory?" "Real alchemy," Harry confirmed, seeing no reason to hide what would soon become obvious anyway. "Nicholas has been teaching me since I was 6. This revelation caused several nearby students to turn and stare. Alchemy was considered an advanced, almost mythical branch of magic, typically studied only by the most accomplished adult wizards and witches after years of preparation. "You'll have to demonstrate sometime," Philippe said, his tone making it sound more like a challenge than a request. "If it's true." Harry smiled slightly. I'd be happy to. Perhaps after Professor Devereux's first transmutation class. I hear he appreciates practical demonstrations. Philippe nodded, apparently satisfied for the moment, and moved away to join another group of first years. Harry wasn't sure if he'd just made a friend or an enemy, but he had a feeling Philippe Delacour would be significant in his Beauxbatons experience one way or another. Later that evening, as the first years settled into their dormitories, individual rooms at Beauxbatons, rather than the shared dormitories of Hogwarts, Harry found a moment to write a quick note to the Flamels, updating them on his sorting and first impressions. As he was sealing the letter, a soft knock came at his door. It was a small, nervous-looking boy with thick glasses and a book clutched to his chest. Hello, the boy said in French. I'm Maurice Lefebvre. My mother tutored you in history and language? Harry smiled in recognition. Madame Lefebvre's son. She mentioned you'd be starting Beauxbatons this year too. It's nice to meet you. Maurice relaxed slightly. I wanted to introduce myself properly. Mother speaks very highly of you. He hesitated, then added in a rush, also, I saw what happened with the mirror. It showed something else before the Omberlin symbol, didn't it? Harry blinked in surprise. No one else seemed to have noticed the momentary appearance of the phoenix. You saw that? Maurice nodded eagerly. I've read about the Miroir de l'Âme. It's supposed to show only house symbols, but there are legends that sometimes, for very unique individuals, it briefly reveals their true magical essence before displaying their house. A phoenix, Harry murmured. Do you know what that might mean? Rebirth, renewal, immortality, Maurice recited, clearly in his element discussing magical theory. Also a connection to fire and healing magic. It's a powerful symbol. He pushed his glasses up nervously. I wouldn't mention it to others, though. Some might see it as another thing that makes you different. Harry nodded, grateful for the advice. Thanks, Maurice. I appreciate the insight, and the discretion. Maurice beamed, clearly pleased to have been helpful. If you ever need information about Beauxbatons history or obscure magical theory, just ask. It's kind of my specialty. After Maurice left, Harry finished his letter to the Flamels, adding a postscript about the phoenix symbol and asking if they had any insights. He then prepared for bed, setting up the protective alchemical wards Nicholas had taught him around his room. As he drifted off to sleep, Harry reflected on his eventful first day. Between the unusual mirror incident, his encounter with Philippe Delacour, and the hint of danger that Nicholas had warned him about, his time at Beauxbatons promised to be anything but ordinary. Harry's first week at Beauxbatons was a whirlwind of new experiences. The curriculum was more diverse than he had expected, with standard subjects like charms, transfiguration, and potions complemented by uniquely Beauxbatons offerings such as magical aesthetics, elemental harmonics, and advanced transmutation. It quickly became apparent to both students and faculty that Harry's education with the Flamels had placed him far ahead of his peers in several subjects. In transmutation, taught by the elderly but sharp-eyed Professor Devereux, Harry demonstrated an ability to transform objects with a precision that left even the professor momentarily speechless. Mr. Potter, Devereux said after Harry had perfectly transmuted a wooden cube into a glass sphere without losing any mass, an exercise most students wouldn't attempt until their third year. It seems the rumors of your alchemical aptitude were not exaggerated. Philippe Delacour, sitting across the classroom, watched with narrowed eyes as Harry modestly accepted the praise. The implied challenge from their first meeting hung in the air. After class, as students were filing out, Philippe approached Harry. Impressive, Potter. But basic transmutation isn't the same as true alchemy. Several students paused to watch the exchange, sensing the undercurrent of competition. Harry considered his response carefully. He had no desire to show off, but neither did he want to appear intimidated. You're right, he agreed. Alchemy goes far beyond simple transformations. It's about understanding the essential nature of substances and the principles that govern their interactions. Perhaps you could demonstrate a real alchemical process, Philippe suggested, his tone making it clear this was indeed a challenge. Say, during the free period this afternoon. In the practice laboratory. Harry nodded. I'd be happy to. Though I should warn you, some of the processes I've studied might seem unusual compared to what's in the first-year curriculum. Word of the upcoming demonstration spread quickly. By the time Harry arrived at the practice laboratory that afternoon, a small crowd of students had gathered, including Elise, who gave him an encouraging smile, Maurice, clutching a notebook eagerly, and several older students curious to see what all the fuss was about. Professor Devereux was also present, standing unobtrusively at the back of the room with an expression of polite skepticism. Harry had come prepared, bringing a small kit of specialized tools and ingredients from his personal collection. He set them out methodically on the workbench as the other students watched. What I'm going to demonstrate, he explained, slipping into the teaching mode he developed during discussions with Nicholas, is a process called sympathetic transmutation, the ability to affect one substance by manipulating another that shares certain essential properties. He placed 2 identical silver coins on the workbench, several feet apart. Next to one coin, he arranged a small crucible, various powdered substances, and a tiny crystal vial of what appeared to be clear liquid. Traditional transmutation works directly on the target object, Harry continued, aware of Philippe's intense scrutiny. Alchemy, however, recognizes that objects with shared origins or properties maintain connections that can be leveraged. Working with practiced precision, Harry combined the powders in specific proportions, added 3 drops from the crystal vial, and placed the mixture in the crucible. With a wave of his wand and a murmured incantation, he ignited a flame beneath it. As the mixture began to bubble and emit a soft blue glow, Harry used a silver tool to trace alchemical symbols in the air above the crucible. The symbols hung there, shimmering with golden light. The principles of correspondence and resonance allow changes made to one object to manifest in its counterpart, Harry explained, his focus unwavering as he worked. By understanding the essential nature of silver and establishing the sympathetic link between these coins, I can, he made a quick, decisive gesture, and the symbols flared brightly before sinking into the bubbling mixture. The coin beside the crucible began to glow, and simultaneously, the distant coin glowed as well. When the light faded, both coins had transformed into exquisite silver roses. A murmur of appreciation ran through the watching students. Even Philippe looked impressed despite himself. Remarkable, Professor Devereux said, stepping forward. Sympathetic transmutation is typically not taught until the advanced levels, and even then, most wizards struggle to establish the necessary resonance. He picked up one of the silver roses, examining it closely. The detail is extraordinary. The transmutation is complete down to the cellular level. Thank you, Professor, Harry said modestly. It's a process Nicholas, Mr. Flamel, taught me last year. And the medium you used to establish the sympathetic link, the professor inquired. Phoenix tears, Harry replied, diluted with essence of moonstone. The tear's regenerative properties enhance the natural resonance between objects of shared origin. Philippe stepped forward, examining the second rose. Where would a first-year student acquire phoenix tears? He asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. From Albus Dumbledore, Harry answered honestly. His phoenix, Fawkes, occasionally provides tears for Nicholas's research. He gave me a small vial as a parting gift before I left for Beauxbatons. This revelation sparked another round of whispers. Connections to both Nicholas Flamel and Albus Dumbledore made Harry even more intriguing to his classmates. Mr. Potter, Professor Devereux said, would be interested in discussing your alchemical education further. Perhaps you would be willing to assist with some demonstrations for my advanced classes. I'd be honored, Professor, Harry replied, genuinely pleased by the invitation. As the crowd dispersed, Philippe approached Harry directly. Well done, Potter, he said, his tone less challenging than before. It seems your reputation is deserved. Though I wonder why someone with your abilities would choose Beauxbatons over Hogwarts, where your parents studied. The question was pointed but not unfriendly. Harry sensed that his demonstration had earned him a measure of respect from the French boy. Beauxbatons has a stronger focus on transformative magic, Harry replied carefully. And the Flamels believed I would benefit from a more normal experience here. Philippe raised an eyebrow. Normal? As the ward of the most famous alchemist in history, demonstrating university-level transmutation as a first year? I doubt your experience will ever be normal, Potter. With that, Philippe departed, leaving Harry to pack up his supplies. Elise and Maurice quickly took his place. That was brilliant, Harry. Elise exclaimed. The look on Philippe's face when both coins transformed, priceless. Do you think you could explain the principles of sympathetic resonance sometime? Maurice asked eagerly. I've read about it, but seeing it in practice was fascinating. Harry smiled at his new friends. Of course. Maybe this weekend after I return from visiting the Flamels. As they left the laboratory together, Harry felt a mixture of satisfaction and caution. His demonstration had certainly made an impression, which would make it easier to form connections with his classmates. But it had also drawn attention to his unusual abilities, attention that Nicholas had warned might be dangerous given the threat of the Opus Tenibri. He would need to be careful about how much he revealed going forward. Balancing his natural enthusiasm for alchemy with necessary discretion would be yet another challenge of his time at Beauxbatons. That Friday evening, Harry returned to Château Flamel as planned, arriving via a special portkey Madame Maxime had authorized. Nicholas and Perenelle were waiting for him in the entrance hall, eager to hear about his first week. Over dinner, Harry recounted his experiences, his sorting into Ombrelon, his classes, his new friendships with Elise and Maurice, and his complicated interaction with Philippe Delacour. Armand Delacour's son, Nicholas mused. Interesting. The Delacours are an old and respected family, though Armand and I often find ourselves on opposite sides of policy debates at the Confederation. Philippe seemed almost hostile at first, Harry said, but after the alchemy demonstration, he was, well, not friendly exactly, but less antagonistic. A demonstration? Perenelle inquired, raising an elegant eyebrow. What did you show them? Sympathetic transmutation with the silver coins, using the Phoenix Tear solution, Harry admitted. Was that too much? The Flamels exchanged one of their meaningful glances. It was certainly advanced, Nicholas said carefully, but not beyond what would be expected of the student of a master alchemist. And it may have been useful to establish your credentials early. Just be cautious about revealing the full extent of your capabilities. Like the work we've done on essence extraction and magical core stabilization, Perenelle added. Harry nodded his understanding. Some of the techniques Nicholas had taught him ventured into areas of alchemy that were either extremely rare or, in some cases, thought to be impossible by the wider magical community. There's something else, Harry said, recounting the incident with the Miroir de l'Âme and the momentary appearance of the phoenix symbol. Maurice Lefebvre noticed it too. He said it might represent my true magical essence. Nicholas looked intrigued. The phoenix is a powerful symbol in alchemy, representing not just rebirth but the perfect fusion of opposing elements, life from death, immortality from destruction. It may be related to your connection to the killing curse, Perenelle suggested. You survived what should have been unsurvivable. There's a resonance there with the phoenix's nature. Does it have anything to do with the people who might be after me? Harry asked directly. The Opus Tenibri? Nicholas sighed heavily. Possibly. If they believe you possess some innate connection to the principles of death and rebirth, it would make you even more valuable for their twisted version of the great work. Have you learned anything more about them since I left? We've been making inquiries, Perenelle said. The Opus Tenibri has existed for centuries, almost as long as Nicholas and I have. They believe that the path to perfect immortality lies not in the Philosopher's Stone, which extends life but doesn't conquer death entirely, but in a ritual they call the Magnum Opus Mortis. The great work of death, Harry translated. Yes, Nicholas continued. Their theory is that by sacrificing individuals with exceptional magical properties and harvesting their essence at the moment of death, they can create an elixir that grants true immortality, not just extended life, but invulnerability to death itself. And they think I have exceptional magical properties? Harry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You survived the killing curse, Perenelle said gently. No one else in recorded history has done that. And now you're showing remarkable alchemical abilities at a young age. From their perspective, you would be an ideal component for their work. Harry sat in silence, absorbing this disturbing information. Finally, he asked, what should I do? Continue your education, Nicholas said firmly. Both at Beauxbatons and with us during your weekend visits. Knowledge and skill are your best protections. But remain vigilant, especially around strangers showing unusual interest in your abilities. And perhaps, Perenelle added with a small smile, cultivate your new friendships. Elise, Maurice, and even young Mr. Delacour could be valuable allies. Later that night, in his familiar bedroom at the château, Harry reflected on the complexity of his situation. He had escaped the cupboard under the stairs only to find himself caught in a much larger, more dangerous game, one involving ancient alchemical societies, immortality seekers, and his own mysterious survival of a deadly curse. Yet despite these shadows, Harry felt more prepared and supported than he could have imagined that stormy night 5 years ago. He had knowledge, power, and people who genuinely cared for him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the thoughtful precision and adaptability that had served him well in his alchemical studies. With that determination in mind, Harry began reviewing the advanced protective transmutations Nicholas had promised to teach him this weekend. If dark alchemists were hunting him, they would find that Harry Potter was no easy prey. As autumn deepened at Beauxbatons, Harry settled into a routine. Weekdays were filled with classes, study sessions with Elise and Maurice, and occasional verbal sparring with Philippe Delacour. Weekends meant returning to Château Flamel for intensive alchemical training with Nicholas and Perenelle. His reputation at school continued to grow. After his initial demonstration, professors in other subjects began to recognize Harry's unusual abilities. In charms, he showed an intuitive understanding of magical energy flow that Professor Rosier attributed to his alchemical background. In defense against the dark arts, his knowledge of protective transmutations impressed even the strict Professor Arsenault. Only in magical history did Harry struggle somewhat, finding the rote memorization of dates and names less engaging than subjects that allowed for practical application. Fortunately, Maurice excelled in this area and was happy to help in exchange for Harry's assistance with transmutation. One crisp October morning, Harry was enjoying breakfast in the Beauxbatons dining hall, an airy, elegant space with enchanted ceilings similar to the one at Hogwarts, but displaying not just the sky but ephemeral scenes from magical history that changed throughout the day. Elise joined him, sliding onto the bench beside him with a stack of books and a concerned expression. "Have you seen this?" she asked, pushing that morning's copy of L'Oracle Magique, the French wizarding newspaper, toward him. Harry glanced at the headline, Gringotts Break-In, Vault Once Containing Nicholas Flamel's Research Targeted. He read quickly, learning that a high-security vault at Gringotts Bank in London had been broken into, though nothing was stolen as the vault had been emptied earlier that same day. The article mentioned that the vault had previously held sensitive research materials belonging to legendary alchemist Nicholas Flamel. "This can't be a coincidence," Harry muttered, keeping his voice low. "You think it's connected to what Nicholas told you? About those dark alchemists?" Elise asked. She was the only student Harry had trusted with the full story of the Opus Tenebri's interest in him. "It must be," Harry said grimly. Nicholas mentioned he'd moved some of his more sensitive research from Gringotts to somewhere else for safekeeping. This must have been what he was referring to. What would they want with his research papers? Elise wondered. Don't they have their own alchemical traditions? Yes, but Nicholas has been studying alchemy for over 600 years, Harry explained. He's made discoveries that no one else has. And some of his papers contain references to me, and the night my parents died. My magical signature, the residual traces from the killing curse. Which they could use in their ritual, Elise concluded, her eyes widening. Harry, you need to tell Nicholas right away. I will, this weekend, Harry promised. But I don't think there's immediate danger. If they couldn't get the papers from Gringotts, they're nowhere close to completing their plans. Maurice joined them, his arms full of books as usual. What's with the serious faces? He asked, adjusting his glasses as he sat down. Harry showed him the newspaper. Maurice read quickly, his expression growing troubled. There's something else you should know, he said after a moment. I was in the library last night, in the restricted section. How did you get into the restricted section? Elise interrupted. Maurice blushed slightly. Professor Dumas gave me special permission for my independent study project on historical magical artifacts. Anyway, I found something odd. Someone had been through all the books on soul magic and essence extraction. Pages were missing from several ancient texts. Harry felt a chill. Soul magic is dark stuff, Maurice. Who would be looking into that? That's just it, the librarian said a guest lecturer had requested access. A visiting scholar studying historical alchemy. What was the name? Harry asked sharply. Moreau, I think. Sebastian Moreau. He's supposed to give a presentation to the advanced alchemy students next week. Harry and Elise exchanged alarmed glances. Moreau, Harry repeated. I need to tell Nicholas about this immediately, not wait for the weekend. After breakfast, Harry hurried to his room to write a letter to the Flamels. As he was sealing it, he heard a soft knock at his door. Come in, he called, expecting Elise or Maurice. Instead, Professor Devereux entered, looking unusually solemn. Mr. Potter, Madame Maxime requests your presence in her office immediately. It concerns your guardian, Nicholas Flamel. Harry's heart sank. Has something happened? I believe it would be best if the headmistress explained, Professor Devereux said evasively. Please, come with me. As they hurried through the corridors, Harry's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Had the Opus Tenibri made a direct move against the Flamels? Was Nicholas hurt? Or was this about the Gringotts break-in? Madame Maxime's office was a spacious chamber with windows overlooking the entire Beauxbatons grounds. The half-giantess herself sat behind an enormous desk, her expression grave. Harry, she said as he entered. Thank you for coming so quickly. I've just received a communication from Perenelle Flamel. Nicholas has been taken ill very suddenly. Ill? Harry repeated, bewildered. But that's not possible. The elixir of life, it appears to be some form of magical poisoning, Madame Maxime continued. Something that even the elixir cannot immediately counter. Perenelle requests that you return to the château at once. A special port key has been arranged. Harry nodded numbly, trying to process this information. Nicholas Flamel, over 600 years old and protected by the elixir of life, seriously ill. It seemed impossible. This Moreau, he said suddenly. The visiting lecturer, is he already at Beauxbatons? Madame Maxime looked surprised by the question. He arrived yesterday evening. Why do you ask? I need to see him, Harry said urgently. Before I leave for the château. I'm afraid that is not possible, Madame Maxime said firmly. Monsieur Moreau is currently meeting with the Board of Governors. And your port key is scheduled to activate in 15 minutes. Harry wanted to argue, to insist that Moreau might be connected to Nicholas's mysterious illness, but he recognized the futility. His priority had to be getting to the château as quickly as possible. I understand, he said reluctantly. May I bring Elise Dubois with me? Her parents are friends of the Flamels, and she could be helpful. Madame Maxime considered this request, then nodded. Very well. Fetch Miss Dubois and return here in 10 minutes. The port key will take you both directly to Château Flamel. Harry found Elise in the Papillonless common room and quickly explained the situation. She immediately agreed to accompany him, rushing to her room to grab a few essentials. As they hurried back toward Madame Maxime's office, a voice called out to them. Potter. Du Bois. Where are you rushing off to? It was Philippe Delacour, watching them with curiosity from an adjacent corridor. Harry hesitated, then made a split-second decision. Philippe, have you met the visiting lecturer, Moreau? Philippe's eyebrows rose at the unexpected question. Briefly, at my father's estate this summer. He's an old colleague of my father's. Why? Did your father mention anything about his research? Anything about soul magic or essence extraction? Now Philippe looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about, Potter? And why are you and Du Bois carrying travel bags? Nicholas Flamel has been poisoned, Harry said bluntly, ignoring Elisa's gasp of surprise at his directness. And I think Moreau might be involved. He's connected to a group called the Opus Tenibri. Philippe's eyes widened, a flash of recognition crossing his face before he controlled his expression. That's a serious accusation, Potter. Sebastian Moreau is a respected scholar. So you've heard of the Opus Tenibri, Harry pressed. What do you know about them? Philippe glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. Only rumors. Dark alchemists seeking immortality through unethical means. My father mentioned once that Nicholas Flamel had crossed paths with them centuries ago. They're real, and they're active now, Harry insisted. If you hear anything from Moreau, anything at all, will you let us know? Philippe studied Harry's face, seeming to weigh his sincerity. Very well, Potter. But in return, you will explain everything when you get back. Harry nodded. Deal. Send any information to Château Flamel. As Harry and Elise continued to Madame Maxime's office, Elise whispered, Are you sure you can trust him? Not entirely, Harry admitted. But Philippe respects knowledge and power. And whatever his father's politics, I don't think the Delacours would align themselves with dark alchemists who sacrifice people for immortality. The portkey, a delicate silver compass, activated precisely on schedule, whisking Harry and Elise away from Beauxbatons in a blur of color and sensation. When they landed, they found themselves in the entrance hall of Château Flamel. Perenelle was waiting for them, her ageless face lined with worry. Harry, Elise. Thank you for coming so quickly. What happened? Harry asked immediately. How can Nicholas be ill? The elixir has been neutralized somehow, Perenelle finished grimly. Come, I'll show you. She led them through the chateau to the master bedroom, where Nicholas lay on a large four-poster bed. His normally healthy appearance had deteriorated dramatically. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and dark veins were visible across his face and hands. This is no ordinary illness, Perenelle explained as Harry approached the bedside. It's an alchemical poisoning designed specifically to counteract the properties of the elixir of life. Someone with intimate knowledge of the stone's workings created this. Moreau, Harry said with certainty. He's at Beauxbatons now, Perenelle. He's been accessing books on soul magic and essence extraction. Perenelle's expression darkened. Sebastian Moreau. I feared as much. He was Nicholas's apprentice, briefly, nearly 200 years ago. Nicholas dismissed him when he discovered Sebastian's interest in darker aspects of alchemy. Can the poisoning be reversed? Elise asked, looking at Nicholas with concern. Theoretically, yes, Perenelle said. But it would require ingredients so rare that even we don't have them in our stores. And the process is complex, requiring precise alchemical procedures. Tell me what we need, Harry said firmly. I'll find the ingredients. Perenelle looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern. Harry, this isn't a simple transmutation exercise. The risk, Nicholas saved me from the Dursleys, Harry interrupted. He gave me a home, an education, a future. I won't stand by while he suffers. After a moment, Perenelle nodded. Very well. Come to the library. There's a text we need to consult, and I'll need to test a theory about the exact nature of the poison. In the vast Flamel library, Perenelle retrieved an ancient leather-bound volume from a hidden compartment behind one of the bookshelves. The text was written in a language Harry didn't recognize. "This is one of Nicholas's earliest works," she explained. "Written in a personal cipher he developed during his first century of research. It contains his notes on various alchemical toxins and their antidotes." She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. "Here. Based on Nicholas's symptoms, I believe this is the poison used, mortis philosophorum, the philosopher's death. It's designed specifically to corrupt the effects of the elixir, turning its life-giving properties into toxic ones." "The antidote?" Harry asked. "Requires 3 key ingredients," Perenelle said, her finger tracing the ancient text. "Freely given phoenix tears, we have those, thanks to Albus and Fawkes. The essence of a stone that has been transmuted to gold and back 7 times, which we can create, though it will take precise work. And..." She hesitated. "And what?" Elise prompted. "Blood freely given by one who has survived death," Perenelle finished, looking at Harry. "Your blood, Harry." Harry nodded without hesitation. "Of course. What else do we need to do?" "The process is complex," Perenelle continued. "The blood must be properly prepared through an alchemical process, the phoenix tears must be distilled to their purest essence, and the transmuted stone must be ground to powder of a specific consistency. Then all 3 must be combined under the light of the full moon with a catalyst of liquid silver." "When is the next full moon?" Elise asked. "Tomorrow night," Perenelle said. "We have very little time to prepare. And we must assume that Moreau and the Opus Tenibri will attempt to interfere." "Why would they poison Nicholas if they're after me?" Harry asked, the question that had been bothering him since he'd heard the news. "To draw you out," Perenelle said grimly. "To force you to return to the château, away from the protections of Beauxbatons. And possibly to force us to attempt this specific antidote, which requires your blood, something they covet for their own ritual." "It's a trap," Harry realized. "Almost certainly," Perenelle agreed. "But we have little choice if we wish to save Nicholas." "Then we prepare as best we can," Harry said decisively. "We need to begin the stone transmutation immediately. 7 cycles will take hours of precise work." Perenelle nodded approvingly. "I'll prepare the distillation apparatus for the phoenix tears. Elise, if you're willing to assist, I could use help with the initial preparations of the laboratory." "Of course," Elise said without hesitation. "My parents are potion masters, I've been helping in their workshop since I was little." As they moved toward the main laboratory, a house elf appeared with a small silver tray. "A message has arrived for Master Harry," the elf announced, presenting a sealed letter. Harry opened it to find a hastily scrawled note: "Potter, Moreau disappeared from Beauxbatons immediately after you left. He claimed urgent business in Paris. Before he left, I overheard him mention preparations beneath the old temple to someone via Flo. I don't know what it means, but it seemed important. My father once mentioned that the Opus Tenibri had historical connections to ancient alchemical sites beneath Paris. Be careful." P. Delacour. Harry showed the note to Perenelle, who frowned deeply. The old temple, he must mean the ancient alchemical site beneath what is now the Pantheon in Paris. It was a center for alchemical study long before the current building was constructed. What would Moreau be preparing there? Elise asked. Nothing good, Perenelle said grimly. It suggests they're moving forward with their plans more quickly than we anticipated. Which means we have no time to waste. With renewed urgency, they hurried to the laboratory to begin the complex process of creating the antidote that might save Nicholas Flamel, and perhaps thwart whatever dark ritual the Opus Tenibri was preparing beneath Paris. Chapter 2, Trials of Transmutation. The main laboratory of Château Flamel hummed with magical energy. Brass instruments whirred and clicked, monitoring the complex alchemical processes underway. Crystal vials bubbled with iridescent liquids, connected by a network of silver tubes that periodically pulsed with light. At the center of it all, Harry Potter stood before a white marble pedestal, his face illuminated by the soft golden glow of the stone he was transmuting. 5 hours had passed since they'd begun preparing the antidote for Nicholas. Outside, twilight was giving way to night, but none of them had taken a moment's rest. The process was too delicate, too important to risk any interruption. "Sixth cycle beginning," Harry announced, his voice steady despite his fatigue. His hands moved in precise patterns above the stone, which hovered an inch above the pedestal's surface. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he channeled his will and magic into the complex transmutation. The stone, originally a piece of ordinary granite, slowly transformed, its surface rippling like water as it changed from stone to pure gold, glowing brilliantly before beginning the reversion back to stone again. Elise watched from nearby, her hazel eyes wide with amazement. She had assisted Perenelle with the phoenix tear distillation, but now both women had paused their work to observe Harry's transmutation. Even Perenelle, who had witnessed centuries of magical feats, looked impressed. "His control is extraordinary," she murmured to Elise. "Most adult alchemists couldn't maintain the precision required for sequential transmutation cycles." "Is this what he meant?" Elise asked quietly. "About being careful not to show his full abilities at school?" Perenelle nodded. "What you're witnessing goes far beyond the curriculum at Beauxbatons. Nicholas and I debated whether to teach Harry these techniques so young, but his natural aptitude was undeniable." The stone completed its sixth transformation back to granite, now glowing with an inner light that hadn't been present before. Harry exhaled slowly, lowering his hands momentarily. "One more cycle," he said, reaching for a vial of revitalizing potion that Perenelle had prepared. He drank it quickly, feeling a surge of energy flow through his tired body. "Harry," Perenelle said gently, "perhaps I should complete the final transformation. You've been working for hours without rest." Harry shook his head firmly. "I need to finish what I started. The transformative signature needs to remain consistent through all 7 cycles." Perenelle looked as though she might argue but instead nodded. "Very well. But pace yourself carefully. The 7th cycle is always the most challenging." Harry turned back to the stone, centering himself before beginning the final transmutation. This time, he not only moved his hands above the stone but began to trace complex alchemical symbols in the air around it, symbols that glowed with golden light before sinking into the hovering granite. As he worked, Elise whispered to Perenelle, "What exactly will this stone do in the antidote?" "It serves as a purification matrix," Perenelle explained softly, careful not to break Harry's concentration. "Each transmutation cycle enhances its capacity to resonate with and amplify magical properties. After 7 cycles between base stone and gold, it becomes what Nicholas calls a philosophical catalyst, capable of facilitating transformations that would otherwise be impossible." The stone was now pulsing between gold and granite in rapid succession, the transitions becoming faster and more fluid as Harry's symbols multiplied around it. Finally, with a decisive gesture, Harry completed the final symbol, an intricate pattern representing completion and perfection. The stone flashed blindingly bright, forcing Elise and Perenelle to shield their eyes. When the light faded, a perfectly smooth sphere of what appeared to be ordinary granite hovered above the pedestal, but now emitting a faint, pulsing glow from within. "It's done," Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper. His legs trembled with exhaustion, and he gripped the edge of the workbench to steady himself. Perenelle moved swiftly to his side, guiding him to a chair. "Rest now," she instructed. "The phoenix tear essence is nearly ready, and I've prepared the apparatus for the blood ritual. We'll be ready for the final combination at moonrise tomorrow." "How is Nicholas?" Harry asked, looking toward the doorway that led to the residential wing of the château. "Stable, for now," Perenelle said, her ancient eyes showing a vulnerability Harry had rarely seen. "The initial treatment I administered has slowed the poison's progress, but not reversed it. Only the complete antidote can do that." "And Moreau?" Harry asked. Any further information on what he's planning in Paris? Nothing specific, Perenelle replied. I've alerted several trusted contacts to monitor the area beneath the Pantheon, but they've reported nothing unusual yet. Elise, who had been examining their progress notes, looked up with a worried expression. If they're planning something for the full moon as well, then we have less than 24 hours to prepare. Harry nodded grimly. Which means we need to be ready for anything. He tried to stand but swayed slightly, the toll of the prolonged transmutation evident. What you need is food and rest, Perenelle said firmly. Both of you. The preparations are as complete as they can be until tomorrow evening. We'll be of no use to Nicholas if we collapse from exhaustion. Reluctantly, Harry allowed himself to be led from the laboratory. As they passed Nicholas's room, he paused, peering through the half-open door. The ancient alchemist lay still, his breathing shallow but steady, attended by a house elf who was carefully monitoring the enchanted instruments surrounding the bed. We'll save him, Harry promised softly, more to himself than to Perenelle or Elise. Whatever it takes. The night passed fitfully for Harry. Despite his exhaustion, his sleep was interrupted by fragmented dreams, visions of hooded figures performing dark rituals, of Nicholas lying pale and still, of a familiar red-eyed face emerging from swirling alchemical vapors. He woke several times, his scar tingling uncomfortably, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. By morning, Harry felt only marginally rested, but his determination had solidified into unwavering resolve. After a quick breakfast, he returned to the laboratory to review their preparations. Elise joined him shortly after, having sent a message to Maurice at Beauxbatons, asking him to research anything he could find about the ancient alchemical site beneath the Pantheon. He'll come through, she assured Harry. If there's anything in the Beauxbatons library about that site, Maurice will find it. I just hope it's not too late, Harry said, carefully examining the transmuted stone, which continued to pulse with its subtle inner light. Perenelle spent the morning checking on Nicholas and making final adjustments to the distillation apparatus for the Phoenix Tears. By midday, everything was prepared for the evening ritual, everything except for the possibility of interference from the Opus Tenibri. We should expect them to make a move, Harry said as the three gathered for a light lunch in the château's sunlit conservatory. If they poison Nicholas specifically to draw us out and access my blood, they won't just wait and hope. The château's defenses have been reinforced, Perenelle assured him. No one can enter without my knowledge. But they managed to poison Nicholas somehow, Elise pointed out. That means they've already breached your security once. Perenelle's expression darkened. Yes, and I intend to discover exactly how once Nicholas is recovered. In the meantime, I've activated additional protective measures that even Nicholas doesn't use regularly. A soft chime interrupted their conversation, the château's way of announcing a visitor. Perenelle waved her hand, and a shimmering image appeared in the air before them, showing the château's entrance gate. Standing there, looking uncharacteristically anxious, was Philippe Delacour. What's he doing here? Elise asked, surprised. Harry frowned. Let's find out. He turned to Perenelle. Can you verify it's really him before letting him in? Perenelle nodded approvingly at Harry's caution. With another gesture, she magnified the image and performed a silent revealing spell. The air around Philippe briefly shimmered but showed no signs of disguise or polyjuice potion. It appears to be young Mr. Delacour, she confirmed. Though that doesn't guarantee his intentions are benign. I'll speak with him, Harry decided. But keep him outside the main wards for now. Minutes later, Harry stood at the edge of the château's grounds, facing Philippe across a nearly invisible barrier of magical protection. The French boy looked both worried and irritated. Potter, he said without preamble, there are developments you need to know about. I'm listening, Harry replied cautiously. Moreau returned to Beauxbatons this morning, Philippe said. He requested a meeting with the entire Omberlund house to discuss advanced alchemical opportunities. But that's just a pretext, he was asking very specific questions about you and your whereabouts. Harry's eyes narrowed. What kind of questions? When you'd returned to school, whether you had close friends there, whether you'd demonstrated any unusual abilities. He tried to be subtle, but it was obvious he was fishing for information. Philippe's aristocratic features showed genuine concern. After the meeting, I overheard him speaking with someone via a specialized communication mirror. He mentioned tonight's operation and securing the catalyst. The catalyst, Harry repeated. That's me. Philippe's eyebrows rose. So it's true. The Opus Tenibri is targeting you specifically. Harry studied Philippe's face, trying to gauge his trustworthiness. Making a decision, he replied, yes. They believe my survival of the killing curse gives me unique alchemical properties they can use in a ritual for true immortality. Merlin's beard, Philippe muttered. And Moreau, he's with them. He's not just with them, I think he leads them, Harry said. He poisoned Nicholas to draw me out, to force us to create an antidote that requires my blood they need for their ritual. And the timing? The full moon tonight. Critical for both the antidote and, apparently, their ritual. Harry frowned. Philippe, why are you here? Why warn me? The French boy looked uncomfortable with the direct question. I told you my father knows Moreau. What I didn't say is that Moreau has been trying to recruit my father for some exclusive alchemical research group for years. My father declined, but lately. He hesitated. Lately? Harry prompted. Lately he's been reconsidering. Talking about revolutionary approaches to magical longevity and moving beyond outdated ethical constraints. Philippe's expression hardened. I respect my father, but I'm not blind. Whatever Moreau is offering, it comes at too high a price. Harry studied Philippe for a moment longer before making his decision. With a gesture, he disabled a portion of the protective barrier. Come inside. We need to hear everything you know. In the château's strategy room, a chamber Harry had never entered before today, maps and diagrams covered a large round table. Perenelle had activated the room's ancient enchantments, allowing three-dimensional projections of both the château grounds and the area beneath the Pantheon in Paris to hover above the table. Philippe stood somewhat awkwardly among them, clearly impressed by the sophisticated magic but trying not to show it. He had shared everything he knew about Moreau's activities, which wasn't much, but included the critical information that Moreau had scheduled a special demonstration for select students at Beauxbatons for precisely midnight, the peak of the full moon. It's a diversion, Perenelle concluded. He's trying to draw attention away from their true activities in Paris while simultaneously creating an opportunity to infiltrate the château when we're performing the ritual for Nicholas. But how would they know exactly when we're performing the ritual? Elise asked. The antidote requires the full moon at its zenith, Harry explained. That's not obscure alchemical knowledge, anyone familiar with the Mortis Philosophorum poison would know the timing requirements for its antidote. So they're forcing us to choose, Philippe summarized. Complete the ritual to save Nicholas Flamel, or intervene at Beauxbatons to protect the students from whatever Moreau is planning. Or at the Pantheon site, where their main ritual may be occurring, Harry added grimly. We need more information before we can make that decision, Perenelle said. She turned to Philippe. You mentioned Moreau was particularly interested in whether Harry had demonstrated unusual abilities at Beauxbatons. Did he ask about any specific incidents? Philippe frowned thoughtfully. He asked about the alchemy demonstration Harry performed, and whether he'd shown aptitude in transmutation without a wand. Wandless transmutation. Elise looked at Harry with surprise. You can do that? Harry shot Philippe a sharp look before replying, to a limited extent. It's not something I've demonstrated at school. Which means Moreau has other sources of information about Harry's abilities, Perenelle concluded. Possibly from before he arrived at Beauxbatons. A soft chime interrupted them, the château's communication system announcing an incoming message. Perenelle waved her hand, and a small crystal sphere in the center of the table glowed blue. Morris's voice emerged from it, sounding excited and slightly breathless. Elise? Harry? I hope this message finds you. I've discovered something important about the site beneath the Pantheon. It wasn't just any alchemical workshop, it was the original laboratory of Nicholas Flamel before he created the Philosopher's Stone. The texts say he abandoned it after a catastrophic experiment that claimed the lives of 3 apprentices. But here's the crucial part, the site contains a nexus of natural magical convergence lines. If someone were attempting a major alchemical working requiring massive power, that nexus would amplify it exponentially. There was a pause, then Maurice continued more urgently, there's something else. Moreau announced a midnight demonstration for selected students, but I found references in his notes to something called the alignment, apparently a rare astronomical event happening tonight when the full moon aligns perfectly with Mars and Jupiter. The last time this occurred was the night Harry Potter survived the killing curse. The message ended, leaving them in stunned silence. The night I survived Voldemort's attack, Harry murmured. That can't be coincidence. It's not, Perenelle said grimly. Alchemical workings are often tied to astronomical alignments. If tonight repeats the celestial configuration from that Halloween night, it creates optimal conditions for their ritual, Harry finished. Philippe looked between them, clearly struggling to keep up. So what do we do? We can't be in 3 places at once. Harry stood silent for a moment, thinking rapidly. Then he turned to Perenelle. We don't have to be. I have an idea. As dusk approached, final preparations were underway. Harry's plan, refined with input from Perenelle and surprisingly insightful suggestions from Philippe, would require precise timing and coordination, but it offered their best chance of addressing all 3 critical situations simultaneously. The group had split up to prepare. Perenelle was completing the final stages of the Phoenix tear distillation. Elise and Philippe were studying the detailed maps of the Pantheon site, memorizing the layout they would need to navigate. And Harry stood alone in Nicholas's workshop, crafting the most complex alchemical device he had ever attempted. It was a variation on a concept Nicholas had once theorized but never fully implemented, what he called a sympathetic resonator. Based on the principle of sympathetic transmutation that Harry had demonstrated at Beauxbatons, it would allow him to project his alchemical influence across great distances, channeling his abilities through specifically prepared conduits. The device consisted of 3 identical silver discs, each inscribed with intricate alchemical symbols and infused with a drop of Harry's blood. In theory, Harry could transmute one disc and cause simultaneous effects in the other 2, regardless of distance, but only for a limited time and with significant strain. Harry completed the final inscription on the 3rd disc just as Perenelle entered the workshop. The Phoenix tear essence is ready, she announced, then noticed what Harry was working on. Is that Nicholas's sympathetic resonator theory? Yes, Harry confirmed. Or my version of it, at least. Perenelle approached, examining the discs with expert eyes. The theory was sound, but Nicholas could never resolve the energetic backflow issue. The feedback loop would overwhelm the user's magical core. I think I've found a solution, Harry said, pointing to a specific symbol arrangement near the center of each disc. By incorporating a recursive dampening formula here, the feedback disperses harmlessly rather than cycling back to the source. Perenelle's eyebrows rose. That's remarkably elegant, Harry. Nicholas would be impressed. Let's hope it works, Harry said, carefully placing the 3 discs in a velvet-lined box. It's nearly time. They rejoined Elise and Philippe in the main laboratory, where final preparations for Nicholas's antidote were underway. A silver cauldron had been placed beneath a skylight that would allow the full moon's light to shine directly upon it. Beside it, the necessary components waited, the transmuted stone, now ground to a fine powder, the Phoenix tear essence in a crystal vial, and a small silver knife for the blood ritual. Everything is prepared, Perenelle said. Now we need only wait for moonrise. Which gives us time for a final review, Harry said, turning to the others. Elise, you'll remain here with Perenelle to complete the antidote ritual. You have the first resonator disc, which I'll activate if you encounter any interference from the Opus Tenibri. Elise nodded, touching the silver disc now hanging from a chain around her neck. And you're certain you can channel protective transmutations through it from a distance? In theory, Harry admitted. We'll find out. He turned to Philippe. You'll take the second disc and return to Beauxbatons. Stay close to the students attending Moreau's demonstration, but remain inconspicuous. If he attempts anything dangerous, the resonator will allow me to intervene long enough for you to evacuate everyone. Philippe tucked his disc into an inner pocket of his robes. And if Moreau realizes what we're doing? Then you get out immediately, Harry said firmly. Don't try to confront him directly. While you go alone to the Pantheon site, Elise said, her tone making it clear she still wasn't comfortable with this part of the plan. Harry, that's too dangerous. We still don't know exactly what ritual they're attempting. Which is why I need to observe before interfering, Harry replied. And I won't be entirely alone. Perenelle has contacted Dumbledore, who's sending reinforcements. They'll meet me there. I still don't like it, Elise insisted. What if the resonator doesn't work as expected? You'd be facing the entire Opus Tenibri without backup. I'll have this, Harry said, revealing a small crystal vial filled with golden liquid. Perenelle gasped. Harry, that's not what I think it is. A single dose of the elixir of life, Harry confirmed. Nicholas showed me where he keeps the emergency supply. If things go badly, it will at least ensure I survive long enough for help to arrive. The elixir doesn't grant invulnerability, Perenelle warned. It accelerates healing and prevents natural death, but against direct magical attack, it's still better than nothing, Harry interrupted gently. And we're out of alternatives. The sun had set, and through the laboratory skylights, they could see the full moon beginning to rise. It was time. Philippe departed first, using a specialized port key that Perenelle had prepared to return to Beauxbatons. The plan called for him to blend in with the students gathering for Moreau's midnight demonstration, keeping the resonator disc close at hand. As moonlight began to stream through the skylight, Perenelle and Elise initiated the antidote ritual. The transmuted stone powder was carefully measured into the silver cauldron, followed by the phoenix tear essence. All that remained was the addition of Harry's blood at the precise moment of lunar zenith. You don't need to wait until the last minute, Perenelle told him. We can collect the blood now, before you depart. Harry shook his head. The ritual requires the blood to be added fresh, with the donor's magical signature still active within it. I'll return in time, I promise. He embraced Elise, who whispered fiercely in his ear, You'd better, or I'll never forgive you. Then he turned to Perenelle. The ancient alchemist studied him with eyes that had witnessed centuries of history, a complicated mixture of pride and concern in her expression. You are so like your mother, she said softly. Lily had the same determination, the same willingness to face danger to protect those she loved. She drew him into a tight embrace. Be careful, Harry. Remember what Nicholas taught you about alchemical protection. And remember that sometimes, observation is more valuable than immediate action. I will, Harry promised. Take care of Nicholas. I'll be back before the moon reaches its peak. With that, he activated the specialized port key that would take him to Paris, to the ancient catacombs beneath the Pantheon, where the Opus Tenibri was preparing a ritual centuries in the making. The port key deposited Harry in a narrow stone passageway lit by sputtering torches that cast eerie, dancing shadows on the damp walls. The air was heavy with age and decay, underlaid with the distinctive metallic scent of alchemical reagents. Harry took a moment to orient himself. According to the maps they had studied, he was in a section of ancient catacombs that predated the Pantheon above. The main ritual chamber should be approximately 100 meters ahead, accessible through a series of increasingly larger passages. Drawing his wand, Harry cast a disillusionment charm on himself, not perfect invisibility, but enough to blend into the shadows if he remained still. Then he crept forward, every sense alert for signs of Opus Tenibri members. He didn't have to wait long. After navigating 2 intersections, he heard voices echoing from ahead, speaking French, but with the formal, almost ritualistic cadence that marked traditional alchemical ceremonies. Preparations are complete, Master Moreau. The vessels are aligned with the cardinal points, and the catalytic matrices have been activated. Excellent. And our agent at the château? In position, Master. When the Potter boy returns for the blood ritual, they will secure him. Harry froze. They had an agent at the château? His mind raced. Perenelle had verified that no one could enter without her knowledge, which meant the agent must have been there before the enhanced protections were activated, perhaps the same person who had poisoned Nicholas. He needed to warn them, but using conventional magical communication might alert the Opus Tenibri to his presence. The resonator disc was his only option, but he had planned to save its power for a more critical moment. Pressing his back against the rough stone wall, Harry slipped a hand into his pocket, fingers closing around his resonator disc. Closing his eyes, he concentrated on establishing the sympathetic connection with Elise's disc. A gentle warmth spread through his palm as the connection formed. In his mind, Harry visualized a simple alchemical symbol for warning and danger, willing it to manifest through Elise's disc. He felt a momentary resistance, then a sensation like a thin thread stretching between himself and a distant point. The connection held for approximately 10 seconds before dissolving. Harry hoped it had been enough to alert Elise and Perenelle to the potential threat within the château. Pushing aside his concern, he had done what he could for now. Harry continued forward, following the voices to their source. The passage gradually widened, eventually opening into a massive underground chamber that took his breath away. The chamber was circular, at least 30 meters in diameter, with a domed ceiling supported by intricately carved pillars. The entire space was illuminated by hundreds of floating lights that pulsed with varying colors, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. In the center stood a raised platform of polished black stone, upon which was arranged an elaborate alchemical apparatus, tubes and vessels of crystal and precious metals, containing liquids that shimmered and moved with apparent sentience. Around the platform, 12 robed figures stood in a perfect circle, each positioned on what appeared to be a different alchemical symbol inlaid in the floor with silver and gold. At the head of the circle, unmistakable even in ceremonial robes, stood Sebastian Moreau. Harry recognized him from Nicholas's descriptions and the brief glimpse he'd caught during the man's infiltration of the château years ago. Tall and gaunt, with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes, Moreau had the intense focus of a zealot and the confident bearing of a master alchemist. Brothers and sisters of the great work, Moreau intoned, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. For centuries, we have pursued the true path to immortality, not the half-measure of extended life offered by Flamels stone, but true conquest over death itself. Murmurs of assent rose from the assembled figures. Tonight, the celestial alignment mirrors that fateful night when the impossible occurred, when a mere infant survived the unsurvivable, marking him as the perfect catalyst for our magnum opus. Moreau gestured to the complex apparatus. All we require now is the final component, the blood of the boy who lived, infused with the unique resonance of death and rebirth. Harry's hand tightened around his wand. They were expecting to receive his blood from their agent at the château, not knowing he was here instead. That gave him an advantage, but for how long? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a shimmering portal appeared at the edge of the chamber. A hooded figure stepped through, and Harry felt a chill of recognition even before they lowered their hood. It was Madame Lefebvre, Maurice's mother, who had tutored Harry in French and magical history for years. "Master Moreau," she said, her familiar voice now cold and formal, "there is a complication. The boy is not at the château. And they know of my presence. I was forced to flee before securing the blood sample." Moreau's face contorted with anger. "How is this possible? The timing is critical, the alignment will not recur for another 17 years. "Perhaps," said another voice from the shadows, "I can offer an alternative solution." The new speaker stepped into the light, and Harry had to stifle a gasp of shock. It was Armand Delacour, Philippe's father. "The boy must have gone to Beauxbatons," Delacour continued smoothly. My son reported that Potter was suspicious of your demonstration, Moreau. He may have sent a warning. Your son. Moreau's eyes narrowed dangerously. You assured me Philippe was sympathetic to our cause. A miscalculation on my part, Delacour admitted. The boy has developed independent ideas. But it is of no consequence. If Potter has gone to Beauxbatons, he will find your simulacrum handling the demonstration while you complete the more important work here. And if he's neither at the château nor Beauxbatons? Moreau demanded. A cold smile spread across Delacour's aristocratic features. Then he must be here, in Paris. Perhaps even listening to us at this very moment. Harry tensed, pressing himself deeper into the shadows. Had he been detected? Moreau raised his wand. Hominum revelio, he cast, sending a pulse of revealing magic throughout the chamber. Harry felt the spell wash over him, threatening to expose his position. In desperation, he employed a technique Nicholas had taught him, not to block the spell, but to transmute its very essence as it touched him. Drawing on his alchemical training, Harry envisioned the revealing spell as a substance, a complex weave of magical energy with specific properties. Then, in the split second of contact, he transmuted those properties, converting the revealing aspect to a concealing one. The spell passed over him and continued onward, its fundamental nature transformed. Moreau frowned. Nothing. If he's here, he's using methods beyond standard concealment. Then we proceed with the contingency, Delacour said firmly. We don't need the boy himself, merely a suitable quantity of his blood, which I have taken steps to secure. From within his robes, Delacour produced a small crystal vial containing a dark red liquid. From the Beauxbatons medical records. All students provide blood samples for emergency healing purposes. Harry's mind raced. His blood from Beauxbatons? It would be months old, but potentially still viable for their purposes if properly preserved. He needed to act, but revealing himself prematurely against 12 dark alchemists would be suicide. The resonator was his best option. If he could activate it at the critical moment of their ritual, he might be able to disrupt the entire process. As the Opus Tenibri members began taking positions around the central apparatus, Harry carefully maneuvered closer, staying within the deep shadows near the chamber's perimeter. Moreau stood at the head of the apparatus, Delacour at his right hand, as they began a complex incantation in what sounded like ancient Greek. The vial of blood was ceremonially placed in a cradle at the center of the apparatus, directly beneath an opening in the chamber ceiling that Harry hadn't noticed before. Through this aperture, the full moon was becoming visible as it rose higher in the night sky. When the moonlight touched the vial, the blood within began to glow with an unnatural crimson light. Moreau's incantation increased in intensity, and the 12 circle members raised their wands in unison, sending streams of golden energy toward the central apparatus. Harry checked his watch, nearly 11:30. The moon would reach its zenith at midnight, which meant the ritual was approaching its critical phase. He needed to return to the château soon for Nicholas's antidote, but he couldn't leave without disrupting this dark working. Reaching a decision, Harry withdrew the resonator disc from his pocket. If he activated it now, he could channel a transmutation that would alter the properties of the blood in the vial, rendering it useless for their ritual. But the effort would likely reveal his presence and leave him vulnerable to attack. As he weighed his options, a new commotion arose at the chamber entrance. Several Opus Tenibri members turned, wands raised, as a figure burst through the doorway, not an intruder, but one of their own, robes disheveled and expression frantic. Master Moreau. Beauxbatons is compromised. Someone warned the faculty, Madame Maxime has cancelled the demonstration and secured the students. Moreau's expression darkened. Impossible. The simulacrum, dissolved when confronted by the headmistress, the messenger reported. And there's more. Aurors have been summoned to investigate reports of unauthorized alchemical activities beneath the Pantheon. Flamel, Moreau spat. He's recovered sooner than anticipated. Not Flamel, Delacour interrupted, his eyes scanning the shadows with new intensity. Potter. He's coordinating a response on multiple fronts. The French aristocrat raised his wand. He must be here. Find him. Harry knew his window of opportunity was closing. Taking a deep breath, he squeezed the resonator disc, establishing simultaneous connections with both remaining discs, the one with Elise at the château and the one with Philippe at Beauxbatons. The drain on his magic was immediate and severe, like nothing he'd experienced before. It felt as though his very essence was being pulled in 3 directions at once. Gritting his teeth against the sensation, Harry focused on his intended transmutation, not just for the blood vial, but for all 3 locations at once. Through the resonator's connection, Harry could sense the situations at the other locations. At the château, Elise and Perenelle were defending against what appeared to be animated alchemical constructs, bronze homunculi that had emerged from hidden compartments in the laboratory. At Beauxbatons, Philippe was with Madame Maxime and several professors, facing a swirling vortex of alchemical energy that the dissolved simulacrum had left behind. Channeling his will through the triple connection, Harry executed a master transmutation, converting the dark energy at Beauxbatons into harmless light, transmuting the bronze homunculi at the château into inert clay, and most critically, transforming his own blood in the Opus Tenebri's vial from a catalyst for death into a catalyst for failure. The strain was enormous. Harry felt as though his body was burning from within, magical energy coursing through him in amounts no 11-year-old wizard should attempt to channel. But Nicholas had trained him well, teaching him to direct the flow, to serve as a conduit rather than a container for the power. In the chamber, chaos erupted. The blood vial shattered as its contents transmuted, releasing a cloud of golden particles that rose upward through the ceiling aperture rather than flowing into the ritual apparatus as intended. The carefully aligned energies of the 12 circle members went wild, rebounding through the chamber in arcs of destructive force. Potter! Moreau roared, somehow identifying Harry as the source of the disruption despite his concealment. Reveal yourself. But Harry was already moving. The resonator connection had drained him severely, but he had achieved his primary goal, the ritual was disrupted, and he had sent warning to both the château and Beauxbatons. Now he needed to escape and return to help complete Nicholas's antidote. As he darted between shadows toward the exit, a spell struck the wall beside him, showering him with stone fragments. His disillusionment charm was failing as his magical reserves depleted. There! Delacour shouted. By the eastern pillar. Harry abandoned stealth for speed, sprinting toward the exit passage. Spells flew around him, not killing curses, he noted, as they still needed him alive, but stunning and binding spells that would be nearly as fatal to his plans. Block the exits. Moreau commanded. He must not escape. 2 robed figures moved to intercept Harry, wands raised. Without slowing, Harry reached into his pocket and withdrew a small spherical object, one of Nicholas's inventions, a transmutation grenade that would reconfigure the molecular structure of anything within its radius. He tossed it toward the approaching alchemists and shielded his eyes. The sphere erupted in a flash of silver light, and when Harry looked again, both figures were encased in a crystalline substance, frozen mid-motion. The path momentarily clear, Harry pushed forward, his lungs burning and muscles screaming with exhaustion. Behind him, he heard Moreau shouting orders and the sounds of pursuit. He reached the exit passage, but as he entered it, a powerful blasting curse struck the ceiling above. Stone and debris rained down, threatening to cut off his escape route. Harry threw himself forward, sliding beneath a falling slab of stone just as the passage collapsed behind him. Coughing in the dust cloud, Harry staggered to his feet. The cave-in would delay his pursuers, but not stop them. He needed to reach his portkey activation point before they found an alternate route to intercept him. Forcing his tired body onward, Harry navigated the twisting passages, guided by the mental map he had memorized. He was nearing the portkey point when he heard something that made his blood run cold, voices ahead of him, cutting off his escape route. "He'll come this way," a voice said in French. "Moreau wants him alive but incapacitated." Harry pressed himself against the wall, mind racing. He was trapped between the collapsed passage behind and hostiles ahead, with his magical reserves dangerously low. The elixir of life vial in his pocket might restore some energy, but he had been saving it as a last resort. As he weighed his options, a faint vibration came from the resonator disc in his pocket. Someone was trying to establish a connection from one of the other discs. Cautiously, Harry touched the disc, allowing a minimal connection. Elisa's voice came through, faint but clear. "Harry. Are you all right? The homunculi are neutralized, but we sensed your distress through the resonator." "Trapped," Harry whispered, keeping his voice barely audible. "Exit blocked, pursued by Opus Tenibri." There was a moment of silence, then Elisa's voice returned, more urgent. "Perenelle says there's another way out. The catacombs connect to the old sewer system near the eastern wall. Look for a passage marked with 3 vertical lines." Harry glanced around, spotting the faint markings on a narrow opening he had overlooked, half hidden behind a protruding stone. "Found it. What about the antidote?" "We've delayed the final stage," Elise replied. "Nicholas is stable for now. Get out safely, Harry." The connection faded as Harry slipped toward the marked passage. It was narrow, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, and descended steeply into darkness. With no time to hesitate, Harry entered the passage just as voices and footsteps grew louder behind him. The narrow tunnel opened into what was clearly part of a much older system of catacombs, perhaps dating back to Roman times. The air was stale, the walls slick with moisture, and the only light came from patches of phosphorescent fungi growing in clusters. Harry moved as quickly as he dared, following the gentle downward slope. After several minutes, he detected a sound he hadn't expected: flowing water. The passage was leading toward an underground river or sewer. Sure enough, the tunnel eventually opened onto a narrow stone ledge above a channel of dark, swiftly moving water. In the dim light of the fungi, Harry could make out a small wooden boat tethered to a rusted iron ring embedded in the ledge. "Seeking an alternate route, Potter?" Harry whirled around to find Sebastian Moreau standing at the tunnel entrance, alone but imposing in his ceremonial robes. The dark alchemist looked both furious and impressed. "Remarkable work with the resonator," Moreau continued, stepping onto the ledge. "Sympathetic transmutation across multiple locations simultaneously. Nicholas has taught you well." "Too well, perhaps." Harry raised his wand, though both of them knew his magical reserves were severely depleted. "Stay back." "Or what?" Moreau asked, almost curious. "You've exhausted yourself, boy. I can sense your magical core flickering like a candle in the wind. One more spell might push you into dangerous depletion." "Then we're at an impasse," Harry replied, edging toward the boat. "You need me alive for your ritual." Moreau smiled thinly. "The ritual can be adapted. Tonight's alignment was optimal, but not essential. We've waited centuries, we can wait a bit longer." He took another step forward. "But I'm curious, Harry. What did Nicholas tell you about me? About my time as his apprentice?" "That you were brilliant but impatient," Harry answered, keeping his wand steady despite his fatigue. "That you couldn't accept the limitations of the philosopher's stone." "Limitations?" Moreau spat. "The stone is a compromise. It extends life but doesn't conquer death. It requires constant renewal, constant dependence. What I seek, what the Opus Tenibri has always sought, is true immortality. One transformation, permanent and perfect. At the cost of human sacrifice," Harry said. "A necessary component of the great work," Moreau replied, as though discussing an academic theory rather than murder. "All transformation requires sacrifice. Nicholas knows this, though he pretends otherwise." Harry's back was nearly to the boat now. "If you truly believed in your cause, you wouldn't have poisoned your former teacher." Something flickered in Moreau's eyes, regret, perhaps, or wounded pride. "Nicholas gave me no choice. He has systematically blocked our research for centuries, using his influence to restrict access to key alchemical knowledge. And when we finally discovered a viable path forward, a catalyst with unique properties, he took you under his protection, hiding you away at his château. I was 6 years old, Harry said incredulously. You've been targeting me since I was a child. Age is irrelevant in the pursuit of the great work, Moreau said dismissively. But enough talk. You will come with me, Harry Potter. The ritual may be delayed, but your blood, your unique alchemical signature, remains essential. He raised his wand, preparing a binding spell. Harry made his decision. In one fluid motion, he uncorked the vial of elixir of life and drank it, feeling immediate warmth spreading through his body as his magical reserves began to replenish. Simultaneously, he slashed his wand downward, severing the rope that tethered the boat to the ledge. Arresto momentum! Moreau shouted, attempting to freeze the boat in place. But Harry had anticipated this. As the spell streaked toward him, he executed the same transmutation he had used against the revealing charm earlier, transforming the spell's essence from stopping to accelerating. The modified magic struck the boat, propelling it violently away from the ledge and into the swift current. Impressive, Moreau called as the distance between them grew. But this isn't over, Potter. The Opus Tenibri has pursued the true path to immortality for centuries. We will not be deterred by a child, no matter how gifted. Harry didn't waste breath responding. The boat was now moving rapidly downstream, carried by both the current and the transmuted spell's acceleration. He needed to focus on steering and finding an exit point that would allow him to reach his port key and return to the château. The underground river carried him deeper beneath Paris, through ancient tunnels that predated the modern city. Eventually, the channel widened into what appeared to be a cistern or reservoir, with multiple branching waterways. Guiding the boat toward what looked like a maintained section of the sewer system, Harry finally spotted what he was looking for, a maintenance ladder leading upward to a service entrance. Directing the boat to the edge, Harry climbed out and ascended the rusted ladder. The hatch at the top opened with surprising ease, bringing him to a small maintenance shed near the Seine. From here, it was a short walk to the spot where his emergency port key would activate. Checking his watch, Harry felt a surge of anxiety. It was nearly midnight. The moon would reach its zenith any minute, and he needed to be at the château for the final stage of Nicholas's antidote. Hurrying through the deserted Parisian streets, Harry reached the designated location, an unassuming bench in a small park, just as the clock on a nearby church tower began to strike 12. He grabbed the port key, a simple brass key, and felt the familiar pulling sensation as it activated. Harry materialized in the entrance hall of Château Flamel with seconds to spare. Not bothering to announce his arrival, he sprinted through the corridors toward the main laboratory, where Perenelle and Elise would be completing their preparations for the antidote. He burst through the laboratory doors to find an unexpected scene, the aftermath of what had clearly been a fierce battle. Several of the transmuted clay figures he had created through the resonator lay shattered across the floor. Workbenches were overturned, equipment damaged, and scorch marks marred the previously pristine walls. In the center of the room, beneath the skylight where the full moon now shone directly down, Perenelle and Elise stood protectively around the silver cauldron. Both looked disheveled but determined. "Harry!" Elise cried when she saw him. "Thank Merlin you made it." "Just in time," Perenelle added, gesturing urgently toward the cauldron. "The moon reaches its zenith now, we need your blood immediately." Harry rushed forward, rolling up his sleeve. Perenelle handed him the ceremonial silver knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. 3 drops, she instructed. "Directly into the center of the cauldron as you recite the incantation I taught you." Taking the knife, Harry held his palm over the cauldron. The solution within, a shimmering mixture of the transmuted stone powder and phoenix tear essence, pulsed with a soft, pearlescent glow. As the moonlight intensified, reaching its perfect zenith, Harry drew the blade across his palm and spoke the ancient alchemical words, Sanguis Vitae, Sanguis Mortis, Sanguis Reniscendi. Per sacrificium voluntarium, restituo quod corruptum est. 3 drops of blood fell from his palm into the cauldron. The moment they touched the surface, the mixture flared with blinding white light. The liquid began to swirl of its own accord, changing color rapidly, from pearlescent white to deep crimson, then to molten gold, and finally settling into a luminous silver that seemed to contain all colors at once. "It's done," Perenelle breathed, her ancient eyes wide with wonder. "The antidote is complete." Elise carefully filled a crystal vial with the solution, handling it as though it might shatter at the slightest pressure. Perenelle took the vial, and together the three hurried to Nicholas's chamber. The ancient alchemist lay motionless on his bed, his condition visibly worse than when Harry had left. The dark veins had spread across his entire face, and his breathing was shallow and irregular. With gentle precision, Perenelle lifted her husband's head and administered the antidote, pouring the silver liquid between his pale lips. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, gradually, color began to return to Nicholas's face. The dark veins receded, fading first from his forehead, then his cheeks, and finally disappearing entirely. Nicholas's eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Perenelle, then Harry and Elise. "It seems," he said, his voice weak but clear, "that I have missed quite an adventure." Relief flooded through Harry, so intense that his knees nearly buckled. Elise caught his arm, steadying him, her own face alight with joy. "Nicholas," Perenelle said, her voice thick with emotion, "how do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of hippogriffs," the ancient alchemist replied with a weak smile. "But decidedly alive." His gaze settled on Harry. "I suspect I have you to thank for that, my boy." "Not just me," Harry said. "Elise helped prepare the antidote, and Philippe Delacour warned us about Moreau's plans." Nicholas's eyebrows rose at the mention of Delacour. "Armand's son? That is, unexpected." "There's much to explain," Perenelle said, "but it can wait until you've rested. The poison has been neutralized, but your body needs time to recover fully." Nicholas nodded, clearly fighting to stay awake despite his exhaustion. "The Opus Tenibri, their ritual?" "Disrupted," Harry assured him. "They didn't get what they needed. But Moreau escaped, and he made it clear they won't give up." "Of course not," Nicholas murmured. "They've pursued their version of the great work for centuries. One setback won't deter them." His eyes drifted closed. "We must prepare for their next attempt." As Nicholas slipped into a healing sleep, Perenelle ushered Harry and Elise from the room. In the corridor outside, she finally allowed her composed facade to crack, drawing both children into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you. I have lived for over 600 years, but tonight reminded me how precious each moment truly is." When she released them, Harry saw tears in her ancient eyes, perhaps the first he had ever witnessed from the normally stoic alchemist. "What about Madame Lefebvre?" he asked, remembering the betrayal he had discovered in the catacombs. "She was working with the Opus Tenibri all along." "We know," Perenelle said grimly. "She fled when the homunculi were defeated. A notification has been sent to Beauxbatons. Maurice is being monitored for his own protection, though we have no reason to believe he was aware of his mother's affiliations." "And Armand Delacour?" Elise asked. "Philippe should know his father is involved." Perenelle nodded. "That conversation will require delicacy. For now, let's focus on recovery. Both of you have been through an ordeal, and Harry's magical reserves need time to replenish, elixir of life notwithstanding." Harry realized she was right. Despite the elixir's effects, he felt utterly drained, both physically and magically. The triple resonator connection had pushed him to limits he hadn't known existed. "Rest," Perenelle instructed. "Tomorrow we will deal with the aftermath and plan our next steps. The Opus Tenibri has been thwarted for now, but as Nicholas said, they won't abandon their pursuits easily." Harry woke the next morning feeling surprisingly refreshed. The elixir of life had done its work, restoring his magical reserves and healing the minor injuries he had sustained during his escape from the catacombs. As he dressed and made his way downstairs, he found Nicholas in the conservatory, looking remarkably recovered as he enjoyed a cup of tea in the morning sunlight. Harry, the ancient alchemist, greeted him warmly. "Join me, won't you? Perenelle has gone to Beauxbatons to speak with Olympe about last night's events." Harry took a seat across from his guardian, relieved to see him looking so much better. "How are you feeling?" "Much improved," Nicholas replied. "The antidote worked perfectly, a remarkable achievement, particularly under such pressure. Perenelle tells me the transmutation cycles for the stone component were flawless." "I had an excellent teacher," Harry said with a smile. Nicholas's expression grew serious. "She also told me about your encounter with Sebastian Moreau, and your innovative use of the resonator concept. Harry, what you accomplished, coordinating interventions at 3 separate locations while maintaining your own defense, goes beyond anything I would have thought possible for a wizard your age." "I didn't have much choice," Harry said simply. "They were going to use my blood for their ritual, and I couldn't let that happen." "No, indeed." Nicholas sipped his tea thoughtfully. "But the fact remains that you've demonstrated capabilities that will make the Opus Tenibri even more determined to acquire you for their work. And now that Moreau has seen your abilities firsthand." "He'll be back," Harry finished. "He made that clear before I escaped." "Yes," Nicholas agreed. "Though perhaps not immediately. Last night's failure will necessitate a period of regrouping. They lost access to the nexus beneath the Pantheon. Albus informed me that French Aurors have sealed the site, and their ritual components were destroyed." "What about Armand Delacour and Madame Lefebvre?" Harry asked. "They're still out there, and they have connections to Beauxbatons." "A concerning situation, yes." Nicholas set down his teacup. "Especially given young Philippe's actions. His warning undoubtedly helped thwart their plans, which puts him at odds with his father, a potentially dangerous position." Before Harry could respond, Elise entered the conservatory, followed by a house elf carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning," she said, looking much more rested than she had the night before. "You're looking better, Mr. Flamel." "Nicholas, please," he corrected with a smile. "After last night's adventures, I think we're well past formalities." As Elise joined them for breakfast, the conversation turned to the immediate future, specifically, their return to Beauxbatons. Classes would resume the following day, and decisions needed to be made about how much to reveal about the events at the Pantheon. "Madame Maxime has been fully informed," Nicholas said. "But the broader student body has only been told that an unauthorized alchemical demonstration was attempted and properly contained by the faculty." "What about Maurice?" Harry asked, concerned for his friend. "His mother's involvement." "A delicate situation," Nicholas acknowledged. "Perenelle is discussing it with Olympe now. The boy deserves to know the truth, but it must be handled with care." "And Philippe?" Elise added. "He risked a lot to help us." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed he did. His actions suggest he has more integrity than I might have expected from Armand's son." As for Armand himself, the ancient alchemist's expression hardened slightly. "His involvement with the Opus Tenibri will need to be addressed through proper channels. As a member of the International Confederation, he has significant political protection." Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Perenelle, who entered the conservatory looking troubled. "Olympe has agreed to enhance security at Beauxbatons," she announced without preamble. "Additional wards, restricted access for visitors, and monitoring charms in all common areas." "And Maurice?" Harry asked. "He's been told a version of the truth," Perenelle replied, taking a seat beside Nicholas. "That his mother was involved with a dangerous alchemical group and has gone into hiding. The full extent of the Opus Tenebri's objectives has been withheld for now." "How did he take it?" Elise asked softly. "As well as could be expected," Perenelle said. "He's a resilient boy, and remarkably logical. His primary concern was whether he would be held responsible for his mother's actions." "And Philippe?" Harry inquired. "He's been temporarily removed from school by his mother," Perenelle reported. Apparently, there was quite a confrontation at the Delacour estate when Armand returned home to find his wife and son aware of his Opus Tenibri affiliations. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Estelle Delacour is not a witch to be trifled with. If she's taken Philippe's side against Armand, it suggests a significant rift in the family, Perenelle finished. Which may work to our advantage. Estelle has requested a private meeting with us, Nicholas, tomorrow at Beauxbatons when the children return. The conversation continued as they discussed the implications of recent events and preparations for returning to school. Harry found himself thinking about the larger picture, how his life had changed in just 5 years, from the cupboard under the stairs to the center of an ancient alchemical conflict. Later that afternoon, as Harry was packing his belongings for the return to Beauxbatons, Nicholas joined him in his room. "A moment of your time, Harry." Harry nodded, setting aside the books he'd been organizing. Nicholas closed the door and cast a privacy charm before speaking. "There's something we need to discuss before you return to school, something related to your remarkable abilities with the resonator last night." Harry waited, sensing the seriousness in Nicholas's tone. "What you accomplished should not have been possible," Nicholas continued. "Not merely because of your age or experience level, but because the theoretical framework I developed for sympathetic resonance has a fundamental limitation: it requires more magical energy than a single wizard should be able to channel safely." "I did use the elixir," Harry pointed out. "Only after the resonance was established," Nicholas countered. "The initial connection and transmutation occurred before that, when your reserves were already significantly depleted." Harry frowned. "What are you saying?" Nicholas sat on the edge of Harry's bed, his ancient eyes studying Harry with scientific curiosity. "I believe you may have accessed a secondary source of magical energy, something beyond your own core." "Like, drawing from the environment?" Harry asked, recalling theoretical discussions they'd had about ambient magical energy. "No," Nicholas said carefully. "Something more integral. Harry, I've had suspicions for some time about the nature of your connection to the night your parents died. The phoenix symbol in the Miroir de l'Âme, your unusual alchemical intuition, and now this." "Nicholas," Harry said, growing impatient, "what are you suggesting?" "The ancient alchemist side. I believe that when Voldemort's killing curse rebounded, something transferred. A fragment, perhaps, of his magical essence or power." Harry stared at his guardian, stunned. "You think I have part of Voldemort's magic? That's horrible." "Not necessarily," Nicholas said quickly. "Magic itself is neutral, Harry. It's the intent behind its use that determines its nature. If my theory is correct, your inherent goodness has transmuted whatever energy you received that night, just as you transmuted Moreau's spells in the Catacombs." Harry struggled to process this information. Does this make me like him? Like Voldemort?" "No," Nicholas said firmly. "It makes you uniquely yourself, Harry Potter. A young wizard with extraordinary gifts and the wisdom to use them responsibly." He placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "I tell you this not to distress you, but to prepare you. The Opus Tenibri sense this dual nature in your magical signature. It's what makes you so valuable to their ritual." "And if they capture me?" Harry asked quietly. "They won't," Nicholas assured him. "But understanding what they seek will help you defend against their methods." He rose from the bed. "For now, focus on your studies at Beauxbatons. Perenelle and I will continue investigating the Opus Tenebri's plans and strengthening our defenses." As Nicholas moved to leave, Harry called after him, "Is this why Dumbledore arranged for you to adopt me? Did he suspect this connection?" Nicholas paused at the door, considering his words carefully. "Albus has his own theories about that night, not all of which align with mine. But yes, I believe he hoped that alchemical training might help you understand and control whatever legacy that encounter left within you." He smiled gently. "Though I prefer to think he also recognized that you deserved a home where your gifts would be nurtured, not feared." With that, Nicholas left, leaving Harry to contemplate this new perspective on his unique abilities, and the darker implications it suggested about his connection to the wizard who had murdered his parents. The return to Beauxbatons the next day was subdued. The usual vibrant energy of the palace seemed muted, as though the recent events had cast a shadow over the school's typically light-hearted atmosphere. Enhanced security was immediately evident, additional magical barriers shimmered at entrances, and uniformed security wizards patrolled the corridors. Harry and Elise arrived via special port key, accompanied by Perenelle, who would be meeting with Madame Maxime and Estelle Delacour. They were met in the entrance hall by Maurice, who looked pale but composed. "Harry, Elise," he greeted them quietly. "I'm glad you're back safely." Harry stepped forward, unsure how to address the situation with Maurice's mother. Before he could speak, Maurice raised a hand. "You don't need to say anything," he said. "Madame Flamel explained enough. I had no idea about my mother's affiliations." "Of course you didn't," Elise said firmly. "No one thinks you did, Maurice." "Some do," he replied with a wan smile. "There have been whispers since the announcement about enhanced security. Nothing direct, but implication is a powerful thing." Harry felt a surge of protective anger. "Anyone giving you trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle," Maurice assured him, adjusting his glasses in a characteristic gesture. "Actually, Philippe Delacour visited me before he left with his mother. He was quite supportive." "Philippe did?" Harry asked, surprised. Maurice nodded. "He said his father's choices didn't define him, and neither did my mother's define me. It was unexpected but appreciated." Perenelle, who had been listening to their exchange, spoke up. "I must go to my meeting. Harry, Elise, perhaps you could help Maurice gather research materials for a project I've suggested?" Harry recognized this for what it was, a constructive distraction to help Maurice focus on something other than his mother's betrayal. "What kind of project?" he asked. "An analysis of historical alchemical symbols found throughout Beauxbatons," Maurice explained, his expression brightening slightly. "Apparently the original architects incorporated specific patterns into the design, patterns that Madame Flamel believes may have protective properties if properly activated." "Sounds fascinating," Elise said sincerely. "Where do we start?" "The library," Maurice replied, more animated now. "I've already identified several reference texts that document the original construction." As Maurice led them toward the library, Harry glanced back at Perenelle, who gave him an approving nod before departing for her meeting. He understood her unstated message. Keeping Maurice engaged in meaningful research would not only help the boy cope with recent revelations but might also uncover information valuable to their defense against the Opus Tenibri. The Beauxbatons library was a magnificent space, rivaling even the Flamel collection in its grandeur. Soaring ceilings supported by delicate marble columns created an atmosphere of airy spaciousness, while enchanted windows adjusted their light to optimal reading conditions regardless of the weather outside. The books themselves were arranged not in conventional shelves but in elegant spiraling towers that reorganized based on the research needs of the students. Maurice navigated the space with practiced ease, directing the spiral nearest them to present books on architectural history and alchemical symbolism. Within minutes, they had assembled a substantial collection of relevant texts at a private study alcove. According to Madame Flamel's theory, Maurice explained as they began examining the materials, Beauxbatons was designed not just as a school but as a magical nexus, a focal point for positive alchemical energies. The founders incorporated symbols and patterns throughout the structure that, when viewed as a unified system, form a massive protective array. "I've never noticed any obvious alchemical symbols," Elise remarked, flipping through an illustrated history of the palace. "That's by design," Maurice said eagerly. "They're hidden in plain sight, integrated into decorative elements, floor patterns, even the arrangement of windows and doors. Look here." He opened a large architectural schematic showing the original floor plan of the palace. Overlaid on the drawing were faint lines connecting various points throughout the structure. "These connection lines weren't in the original plans," Maurice explained. "I added them based on references in the founders' journals. Each connects points where specific symbols are incorporated into the design. Together, they form larger patterns. Harry leaned forward, studying the schematic with growing interest. These patterns, they're familiar somehow. They should be, Maurice confirmed. They're based on the 7 classical planetary symbols of alchemy: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Moon. Each corresponds to a different form of protection or enhancement. And you think these symbols could be activated? Elise asked. After all this time? Madame Flamel believes so, Maurice replied. The initial enchantments have weakened over centuries, but the framework remains intact. With the right catalyst and procedure, the entire system could be reinvigorated. Harry felt a chill of recognition. A catalyst, like a philosopher's stone. Maurice shook his head. Nothing so powerful would be needed. According to these notes, the system was designed to be activated by the combined will of 7 skilled practitioners, each aligned with one of the planetary principles. Or one practitioner capable of channeling all 7 simultaneously, Harry murmured, thinking of his experience with the resonator. Theoretically possible but dangerously taxing, Maurice said, unaware of Harry's recent feat in the Catacombs. No single wizard could safely channel that much focused alchemical energy. As they continued their research, Harry found himself increasingly intrigued by the palace's hidden protections. The founders of Beauxbatons had clearly been versed in alchemical principles far beyond what was currently taught at the school. Their design incorporated subtleties that even Nicholas might find impressive. The hours passed quickly as they became absorbed in their work. By mid-afternoon, they had mapped most of the planetary patterns and identified key nodes where the symbols were most concentrated. These nodes, strategically positioned throughout the palace, formed what Maurice called anchoring points for the larger protective array. We should examine these anchoring points directly, Harry suggested. See if there are any visible signs of the symbols or any residual magical energy. Elise and Maurice agreed, and they set off to inspect the first location on their list, a decorative fountain in one of the palace's inner courtyards. According to their research, this fountain represented a Venus node, associated with protective barriers against hostile intent. The fountain was a beautiful example of magical craftsmanship, a graceful arrangement of marble nymphs pouring eternally flowing water from silver urns. Students often gathered around it between classes, appreciating its soothing sounds and the subtle refreshing charm that permeated its vicinity. The symbol should be here somewhere, Maurice said, consulting his notes as they circled the fountain. Incorporated into the base design or the water flow pattern. Elise examined the marble base. There are inscriptions here, but they're heavily worn. I can't make them out clearly. Harry approached the water itself, studying not the fountain but the subtle patterns formed by the falling water. Using the alchemical sight Nicholas had taught him, a technique for perceiving magical energies and patterns, he focused on the flow. It's not in the structure, he said after a moment. It's in the water itself. Look. He picked up a fallen leaf and dropped it into the pool at a specific point. The leaf was caught in the current, tracing a perfect Venus symbol before being drawn to the center and disappearing. Brilliant! Maurice exclaimed. The symbol is maintained by the water's enchanted flow pattern. And it's still active, Harry noted, perceiving the faint magical resonance. Weak, but definitely present. They continued their investigation, moving from node to node throughout the palace. Each location revealed a different planetary symbol incorporated in increasingly subtle ways, the Mars symbol hidden in the pattern of stones on a walkway, the Mercury symbol formed by the arrangement of crystals in a chandelier, the Jupiter symbol revealed only when sunlight struck a specific stained glass window at precisely the right angle. By evening, they had confirmed that all 7 planetary nodes were intact, though most had significantly weakened over centuries. Their findings were meticulously documented and organized, ready to present to Perenelle when she concluded her meetings. This is fascinating, Elise said as they reviewed their notes in the papillonless common room. But I still don't understand how this knowledge helps us against the Opus Tenibri. If we could reactivate the full array, Maurice explained, it would create a protective barrier that specifically counters dark alchemical workings. According to my research, the system was designed to recognize and neutralize transmutations intended for harmful purposes, which would prevent them from attempting any rituals on school grounds, Harry concluded. But the activation process, you said it would require 7 practitioners? 7 who understand both the alchemical principles and the specific planetary energies, Maurice confirmed. Where would we find such a group on short notice? We might not need to, Harry said slowly, an idea forming. The resonator concept I used during the Paris incident, with modifications, it might allow for sequential activation rather than simultaneous. One practitioner could potentially activate each node in turn, establishing a progressive cascade. Maurice looked skeptical. The founder's note specifically mentioned simultaneous activation to create proper harmonic resonance. True, Harry acknowledged. But they didn't have access to more recent developments in sympathetic transmutation. If we could create 7 linked resonators, each tuned to a specific planetary frequency. It could work, Elise said, catching his enthusiasm. But it would still require an alchemist of extraordinary skill to serve as the primary channeler. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Devereux, the transmutation teacher. Mr. Potter, he said formally. Madame Maxime requests your presence in her office immediately. Your guardian, Madame Flamel, is waiting for you there. Harry exchanged glances with his friends. I'll find you after, he promised, gathering his notes. As he followed Professor Devereux through the palace corridors, Harry wondered what had transpired in Perenelle's meetings. Had Estelle Delacour provided useful information about her husband's involvement with the Opus Tenibri? Had decisions been made regarding school security? Madame Maxime's office was located in the highest tower of the palace, offering panoramic views of the surrounding countryside. When Harry entered, he found not only Perenelle and the headmistress but also Estelle Delacour and, to his surprise, Philippe. Mr. Potter, Madame Maxime greeted him. Thank you for joining us. We have matters of importance to discuss. Perenelle motioned him to a seat beside her. Harry, Madame Delacour has provided valuable information regarding the Opus Tenebris structure and immediate plans. Estelle Delacour was a striking woman with the same aristocratic features as her son, though her expression carried a warmth that Armand had lacked in their brief encounter. Mr. Potter, she said in lightly accented English, I must first express my gratitude for your warning to Philippe. Had he remained unaware of his father's activities? She left the thought unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Philippe, seated beside his mother, maintained a composed expression, but Harry noted the tension in his shoulders. The situation is complex, Madame Maxime continued. Armand Delacour has not returned to their estate since the incident in Paris. His position in the International Confederation makes direct action against him problematic. He's gone into hiding with the Opus Tenebris, Estelle clarified. I've provided what information I could regarding his known associates and properties, but Armand has always maintained certain private affairs. More importantly, Perenelle added, Estelle has confirmed our suspicion that the Opus Tenebris will attempt another ritual, likely timed to coincide with the next significant astronomical alignment. Which is? Harry asked. The vernal equinox, Philippe answered, speaking for the first time. March 20th. My father has been collecting rare astronomical texts focused on that date for months. That gives us approximately 5 months to prepare, Perenelle noted. Not ideal, but workable. What about Beauxbatons security in the meantime? Harry asked, thinking of the planetary array they had been researching. Enhanced conventional protections have been implemented, Madame Maxime assured him. Though I understand from Madame Flamel that you and your friends have been investigating additional measures. Harry nodded, briefly explaining their discovery of the 7 planetary nodes and the potential for reactivating the palace's original protective array. Madame Maxime looked intrigued. I was aware of alchemical elements in the palace's design, but not of such a comprehensive system. If it could indeed be reactivated. It would provide protection specifically against the kind of alchemical workings the Opus Tenibri employs, Perenelle finished. Harry, this is excellent work. We should prioritize further research into the activation process. There's one more matter to address, Estelle Delacour said. Philippe's continued education and safety. All eyes turned to the French boy, who straightened almost imperceptibly under the attention. Given Armand's connections within the school's board and the ministry, Estelle continued, I am concerned about Philippe's vulnerability should he remain at Beauxbatons. Yet his education must continue. What are you proposing, Madame Delacour? Madame Maxime asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. A temporary educational arrangement, Estelle replied. Perhaps with tutors in a secure location, until the situation with Armand is resolved. Perenelle exchanged a meaningful glance with Madame Maxime before speaking. I may have an alternative suggestion. Nicholas and I have occasionally hosted advanced students at Château Flamel for specialized instruction. Philippe could continue his general education through correspondence with Beauxbatons professors while receiving personalized training in protective magic and alchemical theory. Harry blinked in surprise. The Flamels had never hosted another student during his time with them. In addition, Perenelle continued, such an arrangement would allow Philippe to assist with our research into countering the Opus Tenibri, research that may benefit from his insights into Armand's activities and associates. It was a diplomatic way of suggesting that Philippe might have valuable information about his father's work, Harry realized. But it was also a genuine opportunity for the French boy to continue his education in a secure environment while making positive use of his family connection to the Opus Tenibri. Philippe himself looked caught between surprise and calculation. I would be amenable to such an arrangement, he said carefully. Provided I could maintain regular contact with my mother and continue advancing in the standard Beauxbatons curriculum. Of course, Perenelle assured him. We would work closely with your professors to ensure no disruption to your academic progress. Then it seems we have a solution, Madame Maxime concluded. Mr. Delacour will temporarily transfer to the Flamels' tutelage while maintaining his enrollment at Beauxbatons. Arrangements can be made for him to participate in major school events and examinations as appropriate. As the adults finalized the details, Harry found himself studying Philippe with new interest. The arrogant, challenging boy he had met on his first day at Beauxbatons now seemed more complex, a young wizard caught between family loyalty and his own moral compass. Their rivalry had been evolving into something more like mutual respect before the Paris incident, but this new arrangement would push them into much closer proximity. When the meeting concluded, Harry and Philippe found themselves walking back through the palace corridors together, an awkward silence between them. So, Harry finally said. It seems we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. Philippe nodded stiffly. It appears so. Another silence stretched between them until Philippe spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. I want to be clear, Potter. I'm accepting this arrangement because it serves my interests, not because I've suddenly decided we're friends. I wouldn't expect otherwise, Harry replied evenly. However, Philippe continued, I recognize that our objectives currently align. The Opus Tenibri represents a threat to both of us, to you directly, and to me through my father's involvement. A practical alliance, then, Harry suggested. Cooperation without necessarily friendship. Something like relief flickered across Philippe's aristocratic features. Precisely. I can contribute knowledge about my father's research, associates, and methods. In return, I gain access to the Flamels' expertise and protection. Harry considered this. It was a very Delacour approach, pragmatic, self-interested, but ultimately rational. And perhaps, over time, something more substantial might develop. Agreed, he said, extending his hand. A practical alliance. Philippe hesitated only briefly before shaking Harry's hand. Agreed. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Harry's routine. With Philippe now in residence at Château Flamel, Harry's weekend visits took on a new dynamic. What had once been personal tutoring sessions with Nicholas and Perenelle became more structured lessons that included both boys, with an emphasis on protective alchemy and advanced defensive techniques. To Harry's surprise, Philippe proved to be an excellent student, methodical, precise, and quick to grasp complex theoretical concepts. His approach to magic complemented Harry's more intuitive style, leading to productive partnerships during practical exercises. Their practical alliance gradually evolved into a genuine working relationship, with occasional moments of real camaraderie. At Beauxbatons, meanwhile, Harry continued his regular classes while working with Maurice and Elise on the planetary array project. Their research had progressed significantly, moving from theoretical mapping to practical experiments with activating individual nodes. By early December, they had successfully restored the Venus node to partial functionality, strengthening the protective enchantments around the central courtyard. The process had required Harry to employ techniques at the very edge of his abilities, channeling specific alchemical energies through a prototype resonator Maurice had helped design. The results are encouraging, Maurice reported during one of their research sessions in the library. Diagnostic spells show a 37% increase in the node's protective output, and preliminary tests suggest it's specifically amplifying defenses against hostile transmutation attempts. That still leaves 6 more nodes to restore, Elise pointed out. And according to the founder's notes, the full array's power comes from the harmonic interaction between all 7. One at a time, Harry said pragmatically. We've proven the concept works. Now we just need to refine the process and apply it to the remaining nodes. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Devereux, who had taken a keen interest in their research after Madame Maxime informed the faculty about the planetary array. Impressive work with the Venus node, he commented, joining them at their table. The theoretical implications alone are fascinating, that such an ancient system could be partially restored using modern alchemical techniques. Thank you, Professor, Maurice replied, clearly pleased by the recognition. We're hoping to attempt the Mercury node next, as it appears to be the least degraded of the remaining 6. A wise choice, Devereux agreed. Though I wonder if you've considered the potential drawbacks of sequential activation. Harry looked up with interest. What drawbacks specifically, sir? Harmonic imbalance, the professor explained. By activating some nodes but not others, you create temporary instabilities in the overall magical architecture. Nothing dangerous, he added, seeing their concerned expressions, but potentially counterproductive if not properly managed. That's actually something we've been discussing with the Flamels, Harry said. They suggested that each activated node should be harmonically isolated until the full array is ready for integration. Devereux nodded approvingly. Nicholas always did have an elegant approach to systemic alchemy. If you're following his methodology, you're on solid ground. The professor hesitated, then continued in a more serious tone, I should mention that your work has attracted attention among the faculty and board members. Not all of it positive, I'm afraid. What do you mean? Elise asked, frowning. There are concerns, Devereux said carefully, about students engaging in such advanced magical experimentation, regardless of individual talent or faculty supervision. Particularly given recent events. We have permission from Madame Maxime, Maurice pointed out. Yes, but the headmistress herself is facing pressure from certain board members who believe the school should focus on conventional security measures rather than experimental alchemical protections. Devereux's expression suggested he didn't share this view. I merely wanted to advise you to proceed with discretion. After the professor departed, the 3 friends exchanged troubled looks. Board members like Armand Delacour, perhaps. Elise said quietly. Even in hiding, he must still have influence. Or other Opus Tenibri sympathizers, Harry suggested grimly. We know Madame Lefebvre wasn't the only one with connections to Beauxbatons. Maurice's expression hardened. All the more reason to continue our work. If they're trying to discourage us, it means we're onto something effective. Harry nodded, impressed by his friend's determination. Maurice had grown more confident in the weeks since his mother's betrayal, channeling his hurt and confusion into productive research. His knowledge of Beauxbatons' history and magical theory had proven invaluable to their project. Let's accelerate the timeline, Harry decided. If we can restore the Mercury node before the winter holidays, we'll be on track to complete the full array before the vernal equinox. That's ambitious, Elise cautioned. The Mercury node is less degraded than the others, but it's still a complex restoration. We can do it, Harry insisted. Especially if we incorporate some of the modifications Philippe and I have been working on with the resonator design. This was the other significant development of recent weeks, Philippe's contributions to their research. Though still at Château Flamel, he had been corresponding regularly with Harry, offering insights based on alchemical texts in the Flamel library and his own experiments under Nicholas's supervision. Speaking of Philippe, Maurice said, "How is he adjusting to life with the Flamels?" "It must be a significant change from the Delacour estate." "Better than I expected," Harry admitted. "He's still Philippe, formal, sometimes arrogant, but there's a different side to him when he's engaged in research or practical work. Nicholas says he has natural talent for structural alchemy." "And his father? Any news?" Elise asked. Harry shook his head. "Nothing concrete. Estelle receives occasional communications, but they reveal little about Armand's whereabouts or the Opus Tenebri's activities." Their conversation was interrupted by a gentle chime from Harry's pocket watch, a signal that it was time for his transmutation class. As they gathered their materials, Harry felt a familiar sense of dual purpose that had characterized recent months, balancing his regular studies with the increasingly urgent work of preparing defenses against the Opus Tenebri's next move. 2 weeks before the winter holidays, Beauxbatons held its annual alchemical exhibition, a prestigious competition where students demonstrated their most advanced transmutation work before a panel of judges that included faculty, ministry officials, and invited masters from across Europe. Participation was voluntary but highly competitive, with preliminary selections narrowing the field to just 12 finalists across all age groups. Harry had initially been reluctant to enter, concerned about drawing further attention to his abilities, but Nicholas had encouraged him to participate. Strategic visibility can be as effective as concealment, the ancient alchemist had advised. By demonstrating your skills in a controlled, public setting, you shape the narrative around your abilities rather than leaving it to speculation. Harry's preliminary submission, an elegant demonstration of essence transfer between botanically unrelated plants, had earned him a place among the finalists. Now, as the exhibition approached, he found himself spending extra hours in the practice laboratory, refining his chosen demonstration. The evening before the exhibition, Harry was making final adjustments to his apparatus when Maurice burst into the laboratory, looking unusually animated. "Harry! You need to see this." He thrust a worn journal toward Harry. "I found it in a collection of Founders' papers that Professor Dumas granted me access to." Harry carefully set down the delicate crystal vessel he'd been working with and accepted the journal. "What am I looking at?" "Page 47, Maurice directed, barely containing his excitement. "It's a personal account from Alphonse Beaumont, one of the original 7 founders." Harry turned to the indicated page and found a detailed description of what appeared to be the original activation ceremony for the planetary array. The account included precise instructions for the ritual, specific astronomical timing requirements, and, most significantly, a warning about unexpected results. "The array, once fully empowered, manifested capabilities beyond our initial design," Harry read aloud. "Not merely protection against malevolent transmutation, but active counter-harmonization of nearby alchemical workings. Even the most skilled practitioners found their works undone within the boundaries of our creation." He looked up at Maurice. "This suggests the array doesn't just block dark alchemy, it neutralizes all advanced transmutation within its influence." Maurice nodded eagerly. "Exactly. And look at the next paragraph." Harry continued reading. "This unexpected potency necessitated the implementation of the conductor's exemption, a modification allowing designated practitioners to operate unhindered within the array's influence. Without such exemption, even our own alchemical works were rendered inert, regardless of intention. This could explain why the system was eventually abandoned," Maurice theorized. If it interfered with legitimate alchemical education, the faculty would have gradually allowed it to deactivate, Harry finished. But this also means we need to incorporate the exemption modification if we restore the full array. The procedure is outlined in the following pages, Maurice confirmed. It requires the creation of 7 conductors' keys, 1 for each planetary aspect, and their attunement to specific practitioners. Harry whistled softly. That's significantly more complex than we anticipated. Creating even one such key would be challenging, let alone 7. True, Maurice acknowledged, but consider the advantage. With properly attuned keys, our side could perform advanced alchemy within Beauxbatons while any Opus Tenibri infiltrators would find their workings neutralized. It's brilliant, Harry agreed, but the timing is tight. We've only restored 1 node so far, and the winter holidays start next week. Maurice's expression remained determined. Which is why I've already spoken with Elise and drafted a proposal for Madame Maxime. With official approval, we could continue our work during the holidays. A small team could remain at Beauxbatons while you continue research at Château Flamel. Harry was impressed by Maurice's initiative. You've thought this through. Let's discuss it with Perenelle this weekend. She might have insights on creating the conductor's keys. As they continued reviewing the journal, Harry found his mind wandering to the following day's exhibition. If the planetary array truly neutralized advanced transmutation within Beauxbatons, how had the school managed to host alchemical competitions over the years? Perhaps the array's influence had weakened enough by modern times to permit controlled demonstrations. The exhibition itself promised to be a significant event. According to tradition, the 12 finalists would present their demonstrations in ascending order of age, with the youngest competitors going first. As a first year, Harry would be among the earliest to perform, which he considered an advantage, less time for nervousness to build. Are you prepared for tomorrow? Maurice asked, seemingly reading Harry's thoughts. As ready as I can be, Harry replied. The essence transfer demonstration is solid, though perhaps less flashy than what some of the older students will present. Substance over spectacle, Maurice said approvingly. The judges will recognize the difficulty, even if some of the audience doesn't. Harry appreciated his friend's confidence. We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day for both of us. The grand presentation hall of Beauxbatons had been transformed for the alchemical exhibition. The normally open space now featured tiered seating surrounding a circular stage, with special enclosures for the judges and distinguished guests. Enchanted lighting focused on the stage while floating crystals recorded each demonstration for later review and archiving. Harry waited in the preparation area with the other finalists, reviewing his procedure one final time. Around him, older students made last-minute adjustments to more elaborate setups. The atmosphere was tense but collegial, with competitors exchanging respectful nods and occasional advice. Elise and Maurice had secured seats near the front, promising to provide moral support. Perenelle was present among the distinguished guests, along with Nicholas, who had made a rare public appearance for the occasion. Harry had spotted them briefly during the opening ceremonies, seated near Madame Maxime and several ministry officials. The exhibition began promptly at 10 o'clock, with a first-year Papillona student presenting a competent if somewhat unsteady demonstration of simple metal transmutation. Polite applause followed, and the judges made notes without revealing their impressions. Harry was scheduled fourth, after two other first years and before an ambitious second year from Oberlin. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage with careful composure, his apparatus floating behind him under a controlled levitation charm. The setup was elegantly simple: two glass chambers containing different plants, a rose in one, a sprig of lavender in the other, connected by a series of crystalline tubes and a central alchemical catalyst basin. Harry began with a brief explanation of his objective: to extract and transfer the essence that gave each plant its distinctive fragrance, effectively creating a rose that smelled of lavender and lavender that smelled of rose, without altering their visual appearance or other properties. As he worked, Harry maintained a clear narration of each step, explaining the principles behind the essence separation, purification, and recombination. His movements were precise and confident, reflecting years of practice in the Flamel laboratory. The audience watched with growing interest as the extracted essences, visible as colored mists within the crystal tubes, began to flow and intermingle in carefully controlled patterns. The critical moment came when the transmuted essences had to be reintegrated into their new host plants, a process requiring perfect timing and control. Harry performed a complex wand movement while simultaneously adjusting the flow rate of the catalytic solution, his concentration absolute. For a breathless moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, both plants began to glow with soft light, the rose with a lavender aura, the lavender with a rosy hue. As the glow faded, Harry carefully opened the chambers and presented the results to the judges. One by one, the judges approached to examine and verify the transformation. They cast diagnostic charms to confirm that the plants remained botanically unchanged except for their fragrance properties. Several judges nodded approvingly, particularly when Harry demonstrated that the transformation was stable and complete, not merely a surface enchantment. The applause that followed was enthusiastic, especially from the younger students who could appreciate the difficulty of such precise essence manipulation. Harry caught sight of Nicholas nodding with quiet pride, while Perenelle maintained her usual composed expression despite the evident satisfaction in her eyes. As Harry cleared his apparatus from the stage, he felt a sense of accomplishment, not because he expected to win against the older students' more spectacular demonstrations, but because he had executed a technically challenging transmutation with professional precision. It was the kind of work that would earn respect from true alchemical scholars, regardless of flashier displays. The remainder of the morning passed with increasingly complex demonstrations. A fourth-year student transformed a block of marble into a self-animating chess set. A sixth-year created a miniature weather system inside a glass sphere, complete with transmuted cloud formations and lightning. By lunchtime, all 12 finalists had completed their presentations, and the judges retired to deliberate. Harry joined Elise and Maurice for the midday meal, where they were soon approached by Nicholas and Perenelle. "A flawless execution," Nicholas commented, settling beside Harry at the table. "Essence transfer at that level of specificity is normally a fourth-year technique at minimum." The judges were impressed, Perenelle added. "I overheard Maestro Benoit commenting on your precision control during the reintegration phase." Harry felt a flush of pleasure at their approval. "I was worried it might seem too subtle compared to the weather sphere or the animated chess set." "Spectacle has its place," Nicholas said diplomatically, "but mastery of fundamentals reveals true alchemical aptitude. You demonstrated principles that underlie even the most elaborate transmutations." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Devereux, who looked unusually concerned despite the festive atmosphere. "Nicholas, Perenelle," he greeted them quietly. "I apologize for the intrusion, but there's a situation requiring your attention. One of the judges, Master Reynard from the French Ministry, is asking rather pointed questions about Harry's training." Nicholas's expression remained neutral, but Harry noticed his eyes sharpen with interest. "What sort of questions, Henri?" "About specific techniques demonstrated today that are not typically taught at Beauxbatons or other European schools," Devereux replied. "He seems particularly interested in the catalytic solution Harry used, suggested it bore similarities to certain restricted formulations." Perenelle exchanged a glance with Nicholas. "Is Reynard new to the judging panel?" "I don't recall him from previous exhibitions." "A last-minute replacement," Devereux confirmed. "Master Lavoisier was taken ill yesterday, and Reynard was sent in his place." Harry felt a chill of apprehension. Could he be connected to the Opus Tenibri? "Possibly," Nicholas said quietly. "The timing is suspicious, particularly given your recent progress with the planetary array." "What should we do?" Elise asked, looking worried. "Nothing obvious," Perenelle advised. "Continue as normal. Nicholas and I will engage with Master Reynard during the judge's reception. His credentials should be easily verifiable." "And if they're not?" Maurice pressed. "Then we'll have identified another Opus Tenebris connection," Nicholas said simply. "Knowledge is power, particularly when dealing with secretive organizations." The afternoon session began with exhibition demonstrations from faculty members and guest alchemists, not part of the competition but an educational tradition at Beauxbatons. Harry found it difficult to concentrate, his attention repeatedly drawn to the judge's box where a middle-aged wizard with a meticulously trimmed beard was engaged in quiet conversation with Madame Maxime. "That's Reynard," Elise whispered, following Harry's gaze. "He looks perfectly ordinary." "The most dangerous ones usually do," Harry murmured, remembering Madame Lefebvre's betrayal. The faculty demonstrations concluded with an impressive collaborative transmutation by Professors Devereux and Arsenault, who combined alchemical principles with advanced defensive magic to create a protective barrier that could selectively filter specific magical energies. Finally, Madame Maxime rose to announce the exhibition winners. As expected, the grand prize went to the 6th year who had created the weather sphere, an annual scholarship to study with a master alchemist of their choice after graduation. The second prize was awarded to the animated chess creator. "For our special recognition award," Madame Maxime continued, honoring exceptional innovation regardless of year level, the judges have selected Harry Potter of Omberlin. A surge of surprised applause filled the hall. The special recognition award was rarely given to students below 4th year, making Harry's selection notable. As he made his way to the stage, Harry felt a mixture of pride and unease, pride in the recognition of his work, unease at the additional attention it might bring. Madame Maxime presented him with a crystal plaque and a certificate for access to restricted sections of the Beauxbatons Alchemy Library. "Congratulations, Mr. Potter," she said warmly. "Your demonstration showed remarkable control and understanding of fundamental principles." As Harry accepted the award, he found himself facing the judges directly. Master Reynard was watching him with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for the occasion, his eyes calculating rather than congratulatory. The reception following the award ceremony was a lavish affair held in one of Beauxbatons' elegant ballrooms. Students, faculty, judges, and guests mingled over refreshments while discussing the demonstrations and exchanging alchemical theories. Harry remained close to Elise and Maurice, conscious of Nicholas and Perenelle circulating strategically through the crowd to engage with Master Reynard. "Potter," a familiar voice called. Harry turned to find Philippe Delacour approaching, accompanied by his mother. This was unexpected, Philippe had not mentioned attending the exhibition during their recent correspondence. "Delacour," Harry replied, genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you'd be here." "A last-minute decision," Philippe explained with a slight smile. "Mother thought it would be good for me to maintain connections with school activities despite my alternative educational arrangements." Estelle Delacour greeted Harry warmly. "Congratulations on your award, Mr. Potter. Nicholas speaks highly of your progress." "Thank you, Madame Delacour," Harry responded politely. "Philippe's contributions to our research have been valuable as well." Something passed between mother and son, a look of pride from Estelle, a flicker of pleasure quickly masked on Philippe's aristocratic features. "Have you noticed our friend from the ministry?" Philippe asked quietly, nodding subtly toward Master Reynard. "He seems particularly interested in you and the Flamels." "We've noticed," Harry confirmed. "Nicholas and Perenelle are investigating." "Mother might be able to help," Philippe suggested. "She knows most of the legitimate ministry alchemists through father's former connections." Estelle nodded. "I don't recognize him immediately, but I can make discreet inquiries. The alchemical community in France is relatively small." Before they could continue their conversation, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A group of security wizards had entered the ballroom and were speaking urgently with Madame Maxime. The headmistress's expression grew grave as she listened. "Something's wrong," Maurice murmured, adjusting his glasses nervously. Moments later, Madame Maxime approached their group, accompanied by Perenelle. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Lefebvre, Miss Dubois," she addressed them formally. "Please come with us immediately. There has been an incident requiring your attention." As they followed the headmistress from the ballroom, Harry noticed Master Reynard watching their departure with undisguised interest. Even more concerning, the supposed ministry judge was now discreetly moving toward a side exit, as though planning his own departure. "What's happened?" Harry asked Perenelle once they were in the corridor. "Someone has attempted to access the Venus node," she replied grimly. "The protective measures you implemented triggered an alarm." While everyone was at the exhibition, Maurice realized. The perfect distraction. "Precisely," Madame Maxime confirmed. "The security wizards have secured the courtyard, but they report unusual alchemical residues they cannot identify." They hurried through the palace corridors toward the central courtyard where the Venus fountain stood. As they approached, Harry could sense a disturbance in the magical atmosphere, a discordant resonance that set his teeth on edge. The courtyard had been evacuated, with security wizards maintaining a perimeter around the fountain. Even from a distance, Harry could see that something was wrong. The water, normally crystal clear and flowing in precise patterns, had taken on a murky, reddish tinge. More alarmingly, the flow had changed, the subtle Venus symbol replaced by a different pattern altogether. "That's a corruption sigil," Perenelle said sharply. "Designed to invert the protective properties of the node. Can it be reversed?" Elise asked, looking horrified at the defacement of the beautiful fountain. "Yes, but we need to act quickly," Perenelle replied. "The corruption is spreading along the harmonic lines connecting to the other nodes." Harry stepped forward, studying the altered flow pattern with his alchemical sight. The corruption was indeed spreading, tendrils of malevolent energy seeping into the ground and following invisible pathways toward the other planetary nodes. "I can transmute the water," he said, already calculating the necessary procedure. "Purify it and restore the original flow pattern. But we'll need to reinforce the protective barriers afterward, they'll try again." "We'll need a containment circle first," Perenelle directed. "Elise, Maurice, help me establish the parameters while Harry prepares the purification catalyst." They worked with practiced efficiency, falling into roles that had become familiar during their research sessions. Maurice calculated the optimal containment geometry based on the corruption spread rate, while Elise helped Perenelle establish the magical boundaries. Harry, meanwhile, created a purification solution using components from his exhibition apparatus, which fortunately contained several ingredients effective against corruption magic. As they worked, Nicholas arrived with Madame Maxime and Professor Devereux. "Reynard has disappeared," Nicholas reported. The credentials he presented were legitimate but likely forged. The real Reynard is currently in Switzerland according to the ministry. "It was a coordinated attack," Madame Maxime concluded grimly. "The exhibition served as both distraction and cover for the infiltrator." "The containment is ready," Perenelle announced. Harry approached the fountain, purification catalyst in hand. The corruption had progressed further, the water now a deep crimson and pulsing with malevolent energy. Using his wand, he carefully traced a series of alchemical symbols around the fountain's perimeter, each one glowing briefly before sinking into the stone. "Stand back," he warned, removing the stopper from his catalyst vial. With precise movements, he poured the iridescent liquid in a specific pattern across the water's surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a reaction began, gentle at first, a subtle lightening of the crimson tinge, then increasingly dramatic as the purification catalyst encountered the corruption magic. The water began to churn and steam, colors shifting rapidly as the two alchemical forces battled for dominance. Harry maintained his focus, channeling his will through his wand to guide the purification process. This was delicate work. Too aggressive an approach might damage the original enchantments, too gentle might allow the corruption to resist. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, the strain of precise alchemical manipulation taking its toll. Just as he felt his control beginning to waver, a hand touched his shoulder, Nicholas, lending his considerable power and experience to the effort. Together, master and student directed the purification, gradually forcing the corruption from the fountain's water. As the last traces of crimson faded, Harry executed the final step, a complex transmutation that restored the water's original flow pattern, re-establishing the Venus symbol. The fountain shuddered, then settled into its proper rhythm, once again emanating the subtle protective influence it had maintained for centuries. Well done, Nicholas said quietly, giving Harry's shoulder a squeeze before stepping back. A masterful restoration. But the corruption will have left traces in the connecting lines, Perenelle cautioned. We need to trace and cleanse those as well, or they might spread to the other nodes. I've mapped the primary harmonic pathways, Maurice offered, showing a diagram he had sketched while they worked. There are 3 main connections from this node, leading to Mercury, Moon, and Sun locations. We'll need to split up, Madame Maxime decided. 3 teams to trace and cleanse each pathway. Nicholas, perhaps you and Harry could. She was interrupted by a loud crack that echoed across the courtyard. Everyone turned to see a previously invisible rune on the fountain's base glowing with intense blue light. Down! Nicholas shouted, pulling Harry away from the fountain just as the rune erupted in a blinding flash. When Harry's vision cleared, he was shocked to see a swirling vortex where the fountain had stood, a portal of some kind, radiating alchemical energy unlike anything he had encountered before. A transmutation gate, Perenelle breathed, her expression one of stunned recognition. I haven't seen one in centuries. Before anyone could react further, figures began emerging from the portal, robed and hooded, wands raised and already casting. The Opus Tenibri had breached Beauxbatons directly. Protect the students. Madame Maxime commanded, drawing herself up to her full impressive height as she cast a powerful shield charm. The security wizards responded immediately, engaging the intruders with coordinated spell fire. Nicholas and Perenelle moved with the fluid precision of centuries-long partners, their magic complementing each other as they countered the dark alchemists' attacks. Harry found himself back-to-back with Elise and Maurice, defending against a particularly aggressive attacker who had singled them out. The dark alchemist sent waves of transmutative energy toward them, spells designed to alter living flesh rather than harm directly, a horrifying application of alchemical principles. Drawing on his training, Harry countered with protective transmutations, converting the malevolent energy into harmless light. Elise and Maurice supported his efforts with shield charms and strategic counterspells, their months of research collaboration translating effectively into combat coordination. Across the courtyard, Harry glimpsed Philippe and his mother joining the defense, the younger Delacour demonstrating surprisingly advanced combat magic for his age. The battle was chaotic but contained, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Then, emerging last from the portal, came a figure Harry recognized instantly, Sebastian Moreau, his gaunt features visible beneath a half-lowered hood. The Opus Tenibri leader surveyed the scene with calculated calm before raising his wand in a complex pattern. The array, he called to his followers in French. Focus on the array anchors. Harry realized with horror what they intended, not to fight a prolonged battle, but to corrupt or destroy the planetary nodes, eliminating Beauxbatons' ancient protections permanently. Nicholas, he shouted. They're targeting the nodes. The ancient alchemist nodded grimly, already adjusting his strategy. Perenelle, secure the Mercury node. Harry, stay with the Venus, it's most vulnerable after the restoration. Harry turned back to the fountain just in time to see a dark alchemist approaching it with a crystalline device, some kind of corruption amplifier. Without thinking, Harry cast the most powerful shield charm he could manage, then sprinted toward the fountain. The dark alchemist saw him coming and redirected his attack, sending a jet of sickly green energy toward Harry. Too committed to his charge to dodge, Harry employed the transmutation technique he had used in the Paris Catacombs, altering the spell's essential nature as it reached him. The modified energy passed through him harmlessly, continuing on to strike a nearby column where it transmuted stone to water in a spectacular splash. Capitalizing on the alchemist's surprise, Harry closed the distance and engaged directly, his wand movements precise and economical as Nicholas had taught him. The duel was brief but intense. The dark alchemist had experience, but Harry had been training for this specific scenario for years. With a final, decisive combination, a disarming charm followed by a targeted transmutation that crystallized the alchemist's robes, immobilizing him, Harry secured the fountain. Across the courtyard, similar scenes were playing out. Nicholas had subdued 3 attackers single-handedly, while Perenelle and Professor Devereaux had successfully defended the Mercury node location. Madame Maxime, towering over her opponents, was an imposing force, her magic powerful and precise. Sensing the tide turning against them, Moreau raised his wand high. Tenebri Requido, he shouted, and immediately his followers began retreating toward the portal, several dragging injured comrades. Stop them! Madame Maxime commanded, but it was too late. The dark alchemists were disappearing back through the portal, which began to contract as Moreau himself prepared to depart. Harry, determined not to let the Opus Tenibri leader escape, sprinted toward the shrinking gateway. Moreau saw him coming and smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "Not today, Potter," he called, raising something that glinted gold in the fading light. "But soon enough. The equinox approaches." With that, he stepped backward through the portal, which collapsed with a thunderous crack, leaving nothing but scorched stone where it had stood. The courtyard fell silent except for the gentle sound of the restored fountain. Several dark alchemists remained, captured or incapacitated during the battle, but Moreau and most of his inner circle had escaped. "Is everyone all right?" Nicholas called, surveying the aftermath. There were no serious injuries among the defenders, though several security wizards had sustained minor wounds. The captive Opus Tenibri members were being secured with both magical and physical restraints, their wands confiscated. Harry made his way to where Elise and Maurice stood catching their breath. "You both fought brilliantly," he said, genuinely impressed by how well his friends had handled themselves. "That spell conversion technique you used," Elise remarked, still looking slightly stunned. "Was that what you and Nicholas have been practicing?" Harry nodded. Transmutative defense. Changing a spell's nature rather than blocking or deflecting it. "It was incredible," Maurice said, adjusting his glasses, which had somehow remained intact despite the chaos. "I've never read about anything like it in standard magical theory." Their conversation was interrupted by Perenelle, who approached with Madame Maxime. "The palace is being secured," she informed them. "The other planetary nodes appear untouched, though we'll need to verify that more thoroughly." "What was that portal?" Harry asked. "You called it a transmutation gate?" "An ancient technique," Perenelle explained gravely. "Thought lost centuries ago. It allows the creation of temporary pathways between locations by transmuting the fundamental properties of space itself." "How did they create it here?" Maurice asked. "Especially with the enhanced security measures." "The corruption sigil," Nicholas said, joining their group. "It wasn't just meant to corrupt the Venus node, it was preparing the area for gate creation by altering the local magical properties." "A sophisticated operation," Madame Maxime acknowledged. "Clearly planned well in advance and executed with precision." "And yet they failed in their primary objective," Perenelle pointed out. "The nodes remain intact, and we've captured several of their members." "But to what end?" Philippe asked, approaching with his mother. Both looked disheveled but determined. What did they hope to accomplish with such a direct assault? Moreau must have known they couldn't overpower all of Beauxbatons' defenses. It was a perceptive question, Harry realized. The Opus Tenebri's approach had seemed uncharacteristically bold compared to their usually subtle manipulations. "A test," he said suddenly, the realization striking him. "They weren't trying to destroy the nodes, they were testing our defenses, seeing how we'd respond, what resources we'd commit." Nicholas's expression darkened. "Reconnaissance for their equinox ritual. They needed to assess the school's protective capabilities before committing to their final plan." "Then we've revealed our hand," Estelle Delacour said grimly. "They now know about the planetary array, our defensive strategies, even Harry's transmutative defense technique." "Not entirely," Harry countered. "They saw some of our capabilities, but not all. And we've gained valuable intelligence as well, confirmation that they're planning something significant for the equinox, knowledge of their transmutation gate technique, and most importantly, captives who might provide additional information." Madame Maxime nodded approvingly. "Well reasoned, Mr. Potter. We must focus on what we've gained rather than what we've revealed. The immediate priority is securing the school, Perenelle said practically. Students should return to their dormitories while we complete a thorough sweep of all areas, particularly the remaining planetary nodes. And the exhibition guests? Elise asked. Being escorted to secure locations, Madame Maxime assured her. The official explanation is a magical accident requiring technical assessment, no need to cause widespread panic. As the group dispersed to their assigned tasks, Harry found himself walking alongside Nicholas toward the dormitory wings. The ancient alchemist was uncharacteristically quiet, his expression troubled. "What are you thinking?" Harry asked. Nicholas sighed. "That the stakes have risen significantly. The transmutation gate is concerning. It's a technique I haven't seen employed since the 16th century, during the alchemical wars. Its reappearance suggests the Opus Tenibri has accessed knowledge we believed lost or contained. Could they create such a gate anywhere?" Harry asked, grasping the strategic implications. "Not anywhere," Nicholas clarified. "It requires specific conditions, alignment with ley lines, preparation of the local magical environment, and considerable power. But the fact that they managed it at all, especially within Beauxbatons wards." He didn't need to finish the thought. If the Opus Tenibri could breach even Beauxbatons' defenses, few locations would be truly secure. "What happens now?" Harry asked as they reached the junction where they would separate, Nicholas to join the faculty security sweep, Harry to the Omberlin dormitories. "Now," Nicholas said, his voice regaining some of its usual confidence, "we adapt. We study what happened today, strengthen our defenses accordingly, and accelerate our work on the planetary array. Most importantly, we prepare you and your friends for what's coming." "The equinox ritual," Harry said. Nicholas nodded gravely. "Whatever form it takes, you can be certain it will target you directly, Harry. Moreau has seen enough of your abilities now to confirm what he already suspected, you are the key to their version of the great work." "Because of my connection to the killing curse?" Harry asked. "The dual magical nature you theorized?" "Precisely. And after today's demonstration, that theory seems increasingly likely." Nicholas placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Rest now. Tomorrow we begin intensive preparation for the challenges ahead." As Harry continued alone to his dormitory, he reflected on the day's dramatic shift, from the pride of exhibition recognition to the chaos of direct conflict with the Opus Tenibri. The coming months would clearly be anything but ordinary, even by the standards of his already extraordinary life. Inside the Omberlin common room, he found his housemates gathered in anxious clusters, exchanging theories about the magical accident that had disrupted the exhibition. When they saw Harry enter, conversations faltered as curious eyes turned toward him. "Potter," one of the older students called. "You were there. What really happened in the courtyard?" Harry considered his response carefully. The truth would eventually emerge in some form, but panic would serve no one's interests now. "A complex alchemical reaction went wrong," he said, offering a simplified version of events. "The security team handled it efficiently. Everything's under control now." The explanation seemed to satisfy most of his housemates, who returned to their conversations with the excitement of those who had witnessed an interesting disruption to routine but faced no real danger. Only a few, those with more perceptive minds or better political connections, regarded Harry with skeptical expressions that suggested they suspected there was more to the story. Among them was a girl in his year, Solange Mercier, whose father worked in magical law enforcement. "Interesting how many accidents seem to occur around you, Potter," she remarked as he passed her study group. "First your guardian is mysteriously poisoned, then Philippe Delacour suddenly leaves school, and now this." Harry paused, meeting her intelligent gaze. "Sometimes coincidences are just coincidences, Mercier. And sometimes they're not," she replied evenly. "My father says the ministry is increasingly concerned about unusual alchemical activities across Europe. Activities that seem to follow certain patterns." It was a probative comment, fishing for information. Harry recognized the technique. Nicholas had taught him to identify and deflect such conversational maneuvers. The Ministry should be concerned about many things, he responded neutrally. Fortunately, Beauxbatons has excellent security protocols. We're all quite safe here. The claim felt hollow even as he said it, given the day's events, but maintaining calm among the student body remained important. Panic would only complicate an already complex situation. Later, alone in his room, Harry penned careful letters to both Elise and Maurice, suggesting they meet early the next morning to coordinate their approach to the accelerated planetary array project. The day's attack had made their work more urgent than ever, and with the winter holidays approaching, they had limited time to make significant progress. As he prepared for bed, Harry found himself reflecting on Philippe's question about the Opus Tenebri's objectives. The direct assault had indeed seemed out of character for a group that had operated in shadows for centuries. What had changed to make such boldness necessary? The answer, he realized with uncomfortable clarity, might be him. His growing mastery of alchemy, his success in thwarting their Paris ritual, and now his progress with the planetary array, all represented direct threats to their plans. Perhaps they had decided that subtle manipulation was no longer sufficient when faced with a rapidly developing adversary. It was a sobering thought. The Opus Tenibri had shown today that they were willing to risk exposure to achieve their goals. The coming conflict would not be fought through proxies and subtle influence but through direct confrontation. As Harry drifted towards sleep, his mind filled with transmutation formulas and defensive strategies, one certainty remained: the vernal equinox would bring a reckoning, and he needed to be ready when it came. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.